Chapter 594, Powerful Secret. Chapter 594, Powerful Secret. Hearing Shifeng accept Wind Chaser's challenge, those who knew just what kind of power Shifeng wielded were confounded. Although PvPs were frequent occurrences in shelters, these fights were usually meant to help each other improve. Take Blue Bull of First Party for example. If not for his notice of Wind Chaser's potential, he would not have bothered sparring with the youth, offering pointers of how the other berserker could improve his techniques. Not to mention, Shifeng was a maverick that had zero relations with their District 1 at all. Since brother Yi Feng is willing to give Chaser a few pointers, this could not have worked out better. Blue Frost was naturally quite pleased with Shifeng's offer. He turned to his subordinate, immediately instructing, Lotus, go to the Lion's Bar and make the arrangements, particularly for the 100-berry wine. Today, we're reserving all of it. Consider it done. Hearing Blue Frost's command, Evening Lotus turned and ran towards the Lion's Bar. However, this scene had left many of those who had come forth to greet Blue Frost speechless. Who is this Yi Feng? Leader Blue Frost is actually being so generous, renting out the entire Lion's Bar. I recall that renting out the Lion's Bar costs 3 gold. You think coins alone are sufficient? You also need plenty of contribution shares to rent out the Lion's Bar. Moreover, the cost only a trivial matter compared to the 100-berry wine. Not only does each bottle cost 1 gold, but it also requires 200 contributions. I have to complete 10 contribution quests just to collect 200 contribution shares. Also, only 20 bottles of 100-berry wine are available each day. That's a total of 20 gold and 4,000 contribution shares. This is worth far more than 1 soul crystal. Everyone shifted their gaze towards Shifeng, awe and curiosity filling their hearts. The Lion's Bar was the best bar available in District 1's shelter. Even Blue Frost's first party would feel a sting from their wallets when they visited the bar, not to mention renting out the entire place and spoiling everyone with 100-berry wine. Not even the visiting first-party leaders of other shelters would warrant such a grand welcome. Following which, Blue Frost led Shifeng on a stroll towards the Lion's Bar, introducing him to District 1's situation on their way. Wind Chaser tagged along in high spirits. He really wanted to know just how powerful Shifeng was to earn such high respect from Blue Frost. Shifeng's 5 senses were far superior to ordinary players. Naturally, he could detect Wind Chaser's fiery fighting spirit. His personality is still the same as it was then, constantly challenging every powerhouse he met. It was no wonder he becomes someone who was only inferior to Tier 6 classes in the past. Shifeng inwardly sighed. In the past, both Blue Frost and Wind Chaser had become extremely famous experts throughout God's domain. Fantasy Shrine, Fantasy Extinguisher's first-rate guild, had only surpassed a powerful guild like Ouroboros due to these experts. In this life, however, Fantasy Extinguisher would not have the chance to receive the epic quest Darkness Descends, so it could not lead him here where he could recruit these people. Instead, that opportunity had fallen into Shifeng's hands in this life. If he could recruit Blue Frost and his team, Zero Wing would certainly grow more powerful for it. Soon, Shifeng and the others arrived before the Lion's Bar. The Lion's Bar was different than other bars in the shelter. This bar that could only be constructed once a shelter had developed up to a certain degree. The NPCs guarding the bar were extremely powerful, with the weakest at level 150, the bouncers being level 180 Tier 2 NPCs, and the proprietress was a level 200 Tier 3 NPC. These NPCs even qualified to guard a small city. Even if monsters invaded the shelter, the Lion's Bar would not fall. Aside from consuming alcohol at the Lion's Bar, players could also engage in PvP battles inside. The PvP battles here operated in a similar fashion to the battles held in the underground arenas found in the outside world in that other players were allowed to place bets on the fights. Hence, many players of District 1 frequented the Lion's Bar. At this moment, however, Blue Frost had reserved the entire establishment, so not many players occupied the 3-story-tall bar right now. Upon entering the Lion's Bar, Shifeng discovered that the place resembled the Colosseum of ancient Rome. There was an arena in the establishment's center. There were also spectator stands surrounding the arena that allowed players to consume alcohol while watching the matches. When Shifeng arrived before a large private room, he discovered that the room already held plenty of players. Every one of these players possessed frightening auras, and they all wore dazzling equipment. The lowest leveled player among them was level 28, and one could easily tell that they were not ordinary players. Brother Yifeng, let me introduce you. These people are the party leaders and vice leaders of our District 1's top 10 parties. They have heard about your arrival, so they wished to make your acquaintance. Blue Frost began introducing Theses leaders, one after another. Hello, I am the party leader of second party, Best Reincarnation. Hello, Big Brother Yifeng. I am the leader of third party, Shallow Moon. These players did not even show a hint of arrogance as they introduced themselves to Shifeng. On the contrary, they treated Shifeng as if he were an old friend. In truth, even without any introduction, Shifeng already knew who they were. In the past, every one of these players had been upper managers of Fantasy Shrine. Encountering Blue Frost and Wind Chaser had already surprised Shifeng. Now, even the many upper managers of Fantasy Shrine appeared before him. Shifeng began to suspect whether or not District 1 had been Fantasy Shrine's main headquarters. After exchanging pleasantries, Shifeng finally understood why Blue Frost had invited all of these players. Unlike the other shelters, the parties of District 1 were fiercely ambitious. They did not care about holding the title of District 1 in this region. Rather, they hoped to step out of this region and become the #1 shelter in all regions. Hence, the parties in District 1 were all united, unlike the parties in other shelters, which treated each other as enemies rather than allies. It was also due to this that the shelter in District 1 had managed to construct the Lion's Bar so quickly. On the other hand, the other shelters in this region had yet to construct a single advanced establishment like the Lion's Bar. As the conversation continued, Blue Frost also revealed Shifeng's victory over the Great Lord Noya and his slaughter of the many chieftains they had encountered on their way back, shocking everyone present. The various parties present had all been helpless against Noya. Only the first party had a small chance of defeating the Great Lord. They had not expected to hear that Shifeng had actually defeated Noya by himself. Even though the Great Lord had been weakened, it was still an astonishing feat. Brother Frost, you are too insincere. You did not record a video for us to take a look. That's right. This will definitely become a legend throughout God's domain. Everyone voiced their complaints, greatly disappointed that they had not personally witnessed Shifeng's performance. At the same time, their reverence of Shifeng grew even more intense. Ha ha ha. I had been completely stupefied by Brother Yifeng's performance. By the time I thought of it, the battle was already over. Blue Frost scratched his head in embarrassment. However, you are not without a chance to watch him fight. In a moment, Brother Yifeng is going to give Chaser a few pointers, so you guys will get to see how powerful Brother Yifeng is. Leader, can I drink a bottle of the 100-berry wine before the match begins? Wind Chaser hurriedly asked Blue Frost in embarrassment. Initially, he had thought Shifeng was only an ordinary maverick. He never expected that Shifeng was actually capable of defeating a great lord by himself. Immediately, Wind Chaser had treated Shifeng as if the swordsman were the strongest expert he had ever encountered. If you were sparring against anyone else today, I wouldn't let you waste a bottle. Here, take this. Blue Frost laughed as he shook his head. He then took a cyan bottle of wind and handed it to Wind Chaser. Thank you, leader. Wind Chaser hurriedly accepted the 100-berry wind. The youthful berserker was like a hungry wolf looking at fresh meat when he saw the bottle of berry wine in his hands. With just a few gulps, he emptied the entire bottle. Wind Chaser's cheeks suddenly flushed, clearly having become drunk already. Ha ha ha. He's drunk after just one bottle. It seems that Chaser still needs training. The others could not help but laugh. Although Wind Chaser had gotten himself drunk, Shifeng could clearly tell that the feeling the berserker gave off had changed. If he had been an unsheathed blade before drinking the wine, he was now a hidden blade. The blade might seem harmless while sheathed, but once it was revealed, it would definitely take its target's life. Though everyone else had similarly detected the change in Wind Chaser, it did not surprise them whatsoever. On the contrary, they all thought it was natural. What's going on here? Shifeng could not help his surprise. Is this related to the 100-berry wine? Chapter 595, Frightening Wine. Chapter 595, Frightening Wine. Shifeng glanced at the bottle of 100-berry wine on the table, confirming that it was identical to the one he had drunk in the past. However, when he had enjoyed the 100-berry wine, he had not experienced any particular changes to his body like Wind Chaser had. He only considered it incredibly delicious, so much so that it was hard to stop drinking. Yet, seeing Wind Chaser's sudden transformation, it was obvious that the 100-berry wine had some hidden effect. Does the 100-berry wine possess some sort of effect that I do not know of? The more Shifeng thought about it, the more he felt it was possible. Aside from satisfying thirst and hunger, some food and beverages in God's domain could increase a player's attributes or provide some other temporary benefits. Take the black steel beer for example. Players that consumed it could gain the ignore levels effect, allowing them to challenge monsters of a higher level without suffering any penalties. Although one could ignore more levels as they consumed more bottles of black steel beer, there were also side effects. One side effect was the drunken effect. With this debuff, one's vision would turn blurry, and their senses would numb, resulting in a decrease in combat power. One might even lose the ability to fight at all if they consumed too many black steel beers. Meanwhile, the 100-berry wine clearly possessed a similar effect. In the past, I only drank a cup of 100-berry wine at a time. On the other hand, Wind Chaser drank the entire bottle at once. These changes must only happen after a player drinks an entire bottle. Shifeng's interest in the 100-berry wine grew. He then jumped onto the arena. Smiling at the drunken Wind Chaser, he said, "Let's get this started." Shifeng intended to test Wind Chaser properly. The 100-berry wine's effect should not be limited to increasing a player's attributes if it was able to cause a person's aura to change to such a degree. The PvP battles held in the Lion's Bars arena were slightly different. Most arenas would not usually limit a player's attributes. The Lion's Bars PvP arena, on the other hand, would adjust both parties' attributes to be on equal footing. Hence, items that increased attributes were useless in this arena, making the fight a competition of techniques only. As the countdown timer above the arena began to tick down, Blue Frost and the others, who watched from the spectator stands, revealed smiles, though the intentions hidden behind each smile were different. "Brother Frost, who do you think will win?" the Oracle, Shallow Moon, asked. Smiling, she continued, "In this match, both sides possess equal attributes. However, while Big Brother Yifeng is a swordsman, Wind Chaser is a berserker. In terms of classes, berserkers possess an innate advantage over swordsmen. Moreover, Wind Chaser drank a bottle of 100-berry wine, increasing his combat power significantly. Even Big Brother Blue Bull would struggle against Wind Chaser with these conditions. Although I believe that Brother Yifeng is very strong, while both of them possess the same attributes, Wind Chaser should have a higher chance of victory, right? After all, he did drink the 100-berry wine," a Guardian Knight commented. Everyone nodded, agreeing with this Guardian Knight's estimation. Everyone present was quite familiar with Wind Chaser's techniques. Among the melee classes in the first party, other than Blue Bull, no one could defeat Wind Chaser in terms of techniques. Meanwhile, against a great lord, players relied more on attributes rather than techniques. Despite Blue Frost's mention of how mysterious and godlike Shifeng was, in their opinion, they only thought of Shifeng as just someone who was slightly stronger than Blue Bull. On the other hand, when Wind Chaser consumed a bottle of 100-berry wine, not even Blue Bull could win against the youthful berserker. Naturally, Shifeng would not fare any better. Since none of you have a high opinion of Brother Yifeng, why don't we place a bet? Blue Frost suggested. This is my favorite part. What are we betting? Best Reincarnation, the leader of Second Party, suddenly grew interested. Simple. We'll bet on the outcome of the battle. The wager will be soul crystals, and I'll be the bookkeeper. If Brother Yifeng wins, the payout ratio will be 1-2, while Wind Chaser will be 1-1. You may only bet on one player. Blue Frost could tell that everyone doubted Shifeng's strength. After all, without having witnessed the battles personally, even he would find it unbelievable. Now, it just so happened he could take advantage of the situation to make a little profit, making up for the cost of the feast he hosted. Okay, I'll bet 2 soul crystals on Wind Chaser. That brat has improved quite a lot recently. Brother Frost, you better not regret your decision. I'll bet 1 soul crystal on Wind Chaser as well. In a short moment, the various party leaders and vice leaders had all placed bets on Wind Chaser winning this match. One could tell just how little trust everyone had in Shifeng's strength. Only the cleric, Evening Lotus, had bet on Shifeng winning. Leader, can I use credit on this bet? I only have 2 soul crystals with me, but I wish to bet 10 crystals on Big Brother Yifeng, Evening Lotus asked as she gave Blue Frost a pitiful look. Immediately, Blue Frost rolled his eyes at his party's cleric. Resolutely, he said, no. If he allowed Evening Lotus to use credit, he wouldn't make any profit. As the battle in the arena began, everyone's gazes locked on Shifeng and Wind Chaser. The moment the battle began, Wind Chaser instantly used charge. Like an agile and powerful cheetah, the berserker dashed towards Shifeng. However, despite this, Shifeng did not try to evade Wind Chaser's attack, allowing the youth's charge skill to connect. He isn't using parry? When Wind Chaser was only 5 yards away from Shifeng, he noticed that Shifeng had still not moved, the swordsman seemingly having no intentions of defending against his charge. Wind Chaser then abruptly swung his great sword. At almost the same moment as his body crashed into Shifeng's, his silver greatsword also struck Shifeng's head. Wind Chaser's actions were both simple and swift. Hooah! The silver greatsword sliced through Shifeng's body and smashed into the ground, creating a long and deep crevice. An afterimage? Sensing that something was amiss, Wind Chaser used Whirlwind Slash, a skill capable of causing massive damage to enemies within a 3-yard radius. The silver greatsword was like a wooden pole in Wind Chaser's hand. With little effort, the berserker transformed into a silver tornado that engulfed everything in its wake. Boom! As Wind Chaser used Whirlwind Slash, a loud boom echoed throughout the arena, followed by a figure flying away from the berserker. Close one. Wind Chaser could not help but sigh with relief when he saw that the figure he had sent flying was none other than Shifeng. If he had not used Whirlwind Slash at the first sign of danger, the sword in Shifeng's hand would have bitten into his body by now. Such impressive dodging speed. I couldn't even see what he did just now, the level 29 shield warrior, best reincarnation, exclaimed in shock. It is no wonder why Leader Frost praised Brother Yifeng so highly. With such an amazing dodging speed, it will be very difficult for Chaser to land a hit, though an assassin might have a chance. Everyone was similarly shocked by the skill Shifeng had displayed. Although a few among them could similarly produce an afterimage, they definitely could not achieve it as silently as Shifeng. Only after Wind Chaser's greatsword landed had everyone realized that he had missed. Hehe, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Big Brother Yifeng hasn't even warmed up yet. Evening Lotus giggled. On their way back to the shelter, Shifeng had frequently used void steps to kill chieftains. That mysterious style of footwork of his was simply unstoppable. In comparison, the technique of using an afterimage to dodge an attack was a trifling matter. The others began laughing when they heard Evening Lotus's words. Nobody believed her at all. In the arena, Wind Chaser finally became serious. Every one of his attacks began targeting Shifeng's vital points or blind spots. Of the berserker's many attacks, his skills contained the most power. Wind Chaser was also extremely proficient in using his skills in conjunction with his ordinary attacks. It was as if the berserker's skills had been tailored for Wind Chaser. So, that's the case. I didn't think that the 100-berry wine possessed such a wonderful effect. It is no wonder the drink is so rare. While Shifeng dodged Wind Chaser's attacks, he also carefully observed the berserker's every action. Although Wind Chaser did have significant physical control, he should still not be able to use his skills so smoothly. In Zero Wing, only Fire Dance and Violet Cloud had achieved this standard. The two were only a thread away from taking half a step into the refinement realm. On the other hand, Wind Chaser was still far from reaching that level. The only explanation Shifeng could come up with was that the 100-berry wine increased a player's compatibility rate with their weapons. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng involuntarily shivered. Improving compatibility rate. This was something that countless experts dreamed of. Otherwise, nobody would bother wasting so much effort to obtain weapons and equipment that fit their styles. Chapter 596 Unbalanced Fight. Chapter 596 Unbalanced Fight. After seeing the 100-berry wine's true function, Shifeng finally understood why Blue Frost and the others could achieve such high skill completion rates. Unfortunately, the wine's supply was simply too low, lowering the number of potential experts who could be nurtured with it. At most, there was just enough for everyone present. Any more and there wouldn't be enough of the beverage to go around. For the next 3 minutes or so, Wind Chaser continued hacking and slashing his greatsword at Shifeng. The more Wind Chaser fought Shifeng, the more he grew frightened. Aside from his first whirlwind slash, none of his other attacks had touched Shifeng. Every time he thought that his great sword was about to connect with Shifeng's body, his weapon was always off its mark just slightly. After a dozen or so times, he could chalk it up to a coincidence. However, if over 100 attacks had the same result, there was definitely no coincidence. Just what is going on? Why can't I hit him? This was the first time Wind Chaser had encountered such a situation. In his past PvP battles, both sides had always suffered some form of damage. It was only a matter of how much, or how little, damage each side suffered. The side with the better techniques would naturally deal more damage, and as the battle dragged on, they would become the victor. However, this battle, in which he could not even hit his opponent, was simply driving him to madness. Is the gap between us really that big? Wind Chaser had already used all of the skills he could, yet, no matter what he did, he could not even scratch the corner of Shifeng's armor. This failure dealt him a huge psychological blow. Big Brother Yi Feng's dodging techniques are brilliant. This is my first time seeing such techniques. Shallow Moon, the leader of District 1's third party, grew excited as she watched the battle between Shifeng and Wind Chaser progress. She desperately tried to absorb whatever information she could regarding Shifeng's dodging techniques. Shallow Moon wasn't the only person with such thoughts. The other leaders also wore stern expressions as they focused on Shifeng's every action. They even recorded the battle for future reference. If I can grasp just half of Brother Yi Feng's dodging techniques, it will become much easier to kill Lord-ranked monsters in the future. Best reincarnation side. You don't say? Lords have extremely high attack power. If an MT can evade 50% of a Lord's attacks, this will significantly reduce the burden on healers. Unfortunately, nobody within our District 1 has managed to reach such a standard yet. As a cleric, Evening Lotus had the most say on this matter. She was the number 1 cleric on District 1's first party. Every time the party's MT tanked a Lord, the MT's HP would fall as quickly as flowing water. As a result, Evening Lotus was forced to heal their party's MT constantly. If she were not careful, she could easily draw the Lord's aggro. It really makes you wonder just how Brother Yi Feng learned such techniques. If the melee players in our parties can learn from him, our District 1's first shelter can unlock the next stage very quickly. As long as their melee players could grasp this brilliant technique, they could easily hunt chieftains and lords out in the field. Their soul crystal farming efficiency would also rise significantly. At that time, they could upgrade their shelter swiftly and catch up to the several large shelters in other regions. Although District 1 was the top shelter in the Evil Ghost domain, it was only a medium shelter. Although their shelter was the only medium shelter among the Evil Ghost domain's districts, other domains already possessed large shelters. Their strength was several times greater than District 1's. The gap between them would only widen further as more time passed. Leader Frost, is there no way to convince Brother Yi Feng to join our District 1? Blue Bull asked. Although Blue Bull was the first party's number 1 berserker, Shifeng's techniques left a deep impact. These techniques shattered the concept of their past combat methods. If they could persuade Yi Feng to join District 1 and become one of the shelter's residents, it could lift the shelter to a whole different level. Hearing Blue Bull's suggestion, the other party leaders also turned to Blue Frost. You guys, Blue Frost was rendered speechless. Although I want that as well, Brother Yi Feng is a maverick. You all know how mavericks behave, right? It really is a pity. The others sighed dejectedly when they recalled Maverick's playstyles. The shelter was like their home. Naturally, they wanted to see their shelter grow stronger. Unfortunately, Mavericks did not like restrictions. As the conversation came to an end, Shifeng stopped dodging Wind Chaser's attacks. I have most of the information that I need. Let's end this match. Shifeng had already obtained a thorough understanding of Wind Chaser's strength and the 100-berry wine's effect. There was no reason to prolong this battle. Immediately, he used void steps and vanished before everyone's eyes. He disappeared. Wind Chaser gaped at his surroundings in disbelief. Looking to his left, right, and even above him, he could not find any trace of Shifeng. Where is he? Wind Chaser could not even sense Shifeng's presence. Normally, when an assassin snuck up to him, even if he could not see the assassin, he could, more or less, sense that someone was nearby. Now, he could not detect even the slightest indication of Shifeng's presence. The swordsman's technique was far more powerful than an assassin's stealth. Everyone in the spectator stands was similarly stupefied. A live human had actually vanished into thin air. No swordsman should possess any stealth-related skills. Once a match began, players could only exit the arena after a victor had been determined. The victor's portrait would also be displayed above the arena after the match ended. If one of the fighters suddenly logged out of the game, the system would automatically determine them as the loser, thereby concluding the match. However, the system had yet to declare the outcome of this match. Thus, the only possibility was that they were really unable to see Shifeng. However, before everyone could recover from their shock, Shifeng appeared beside Wind Chaser. He then swung his sword, sending 3 silver moons towards the berserker's body, intersecting as they struck. Such a fast attack. Although Wind Chaser tried to defend himself with his great sword, Shifeng's sword was simply too fast. The attack landed before he could even react. The force behind Shifeng's chop sent Wind Chaser flying backward. Although they both possessed the same attributes, Shifeng's chop had achieved a 95% completion rate. The skill effect he displayed instantly extinguished over 50% of the youthful berserker's HP. Is he really a swordsman? Wind Chaser was terrified when he saw how much HP he had lost. When he had fought other swordsmen with the same attributes as his own in the past, their chop only managed to devour close to 20% of his HP. Now, however, Shifeng's chop had obliterated over half of his HP. This disparity was insane. Wind Chaser even wondered if the system had made a mistake. What Wind Chaser did not know, however, was that the abyssal blade Shifeng wielded had a 50% chance to deal 200% damage. Adding in his 95% skill completion rate, his total damage was astounding. It's over. Shifeng looked at Wind Chaser, who he had thrown backward, and used Dragon Breath. Dragon Breath was a skill he had gained from a fragmented legendary item. Not only did the skill possess frightening power, but it also required no casting time. The skill's attack speed was also extremely high. In the next moment, a green ray of light devoured Wind Chaser. Inflicting 6 times Shifeng's damage, Dragon Breath depleted Wind Chaser's HP to 0. It's over. The spectating crowd was dumbfounded. Although they had long since realized that Shifeng could defeat Wind Chaser easily, they had not expected him to be capable of finishing off the youthful berserker instantly. How was it possible for a swordsman to instantly kill a plate armor class? Chapter 597, Zero Wing Guild Branch. Chapter 597, Zero Wing Guild Branch. Even if everyone found it inconceivable, the appearance of Shifeng's portrait above the arena was irrefutable proof that he had won this match. If he can defeat Wind Chaser so easily, despite having the same attributes, it is no wonder how he can solo a great lord. Best Reincarnation and the others were shocked. With their standards, even if they fought an ordinary player with the same attributes, it was impossible for them to defeat their opponent instantly. Yet, Shifeng was fully capable of exactly that. The gap between them was simply unimaginable. If before they had treated Shifeng as an expert, now, they treated him like a monster. They were people living in completely different worlds. Meanwhile, Wind Chaser, who had revived below the arena, was still stuck in a daze. Chaser, didn't I tell you earlier? With your weak skills, you are simply flaunting your incompetence before an expert. Why haven't you thanked Brother Yifeng for his pointers yet? Blue Frost laughed when he saw Wind Chaser's stunned expression. He was the slightest bit surprised by Wind Chaser's crushing defeat. Compared to the battle with the great Lord Noya, this match was child's play to Shifeng. Hearing Blue Frost's words, Wind Chaser hurriedly thanked Shifeng. After this match, Wind Chaser finally understood the extent of his strength. Following which, the leaders also turned to ask Shifeng for advice on their combat techniques. Bombarded with questions, Shifeng's response to the situation was not miserly, graciously teaching them, one after another. Before anyone knew it, 3 hours had passed. Even so, none of them could get enough of Shifeng. His guidance was targeted towards improving everyone's individual weaknesses, allowing them to see immediate improvements to their combat power. This result furthered everyone's admiration of Shifeng. Not only did Shifeng possess monster-like strength, but his teaching skills were also on point. In reality, though, Shifeng had only made a few suggestions to remedy their bad combat habits and teach them how to control their foundations. They were unlike Fire Dance and the others, who Lei Bao had personally trained to control their bodies properly. May I know if Brother Frost would be willing to sell me 100-berry wine for the long term? The 100-berry wine sorely tempted Shifeng. Although the residents of District 1 had the 100-berry wine to improve their compatibility rates, they did not possess the foundations necessary to display its full effects. If he had some of the wine for Fire Dance and the others to consume, they would most likely see massive improvements immediately. Brother Yifeng, you should know that the 100-berry wine is a specialty of the Lion's Bar, and its supply is very limited. If it is only a few dozen bottles, I have no problems with giving them to you. However, you saw the 100-berry wine's effects for yourself. It can help us improve our skill completion rates, making it easier for us to understand our skills. If we sell it long-term, it will weaken our shelter's players significantly, Blue Frost explained. I understand this, of course. However, what if I have a different method to improve the shelter's strength? Shifeng smiled. Improve the shelter's strength? Everyone present was suddenly interested. The competition between shelters was very intense. Moreover, as players reached higher levels, the intensity would only grow as fewer high-level maps and resources would be available. Naturally, the areas where players could station shelters would also decrease. Naturally, those with sufficient strength would have priority over the high-resource locations, whereas weaker players would be chased away. Their District 1 had already competed with other shelters many times. In higher-leveled maps, however, the shelters they had to compete with would become more numerous and powerful, so upgrading their shelter's strength was of utmost importance. Join my guild, Zero Wing, Shifeng said. Join your guild? Everyone was stunned. They all knew what a guild was. There were countless guilds in the virtual gaming world. In fact, members of guilds had formed many of the shelters. Only, as there was no guild system available in their location, nobody could officially establish a guild here. Rather than joining a guild, it was more like joining a guild's forces. Many shelters that lacked strength would usually choose to subordinate themselves to a guild's influence, gaining protection and assistance from said guild forces. In return, however, these shelters were required to supply various resources and money to these guilds. Every guild force they knew of was extremely powerful with a plethora of experts. For example, all large shelters were a part of a guild force. Medium shelters, like District 1, stood no chance against them. These guild forces also had plenty of funds and consisted mostly of professional gamers. After considering it for a moment, Blue Frost said, "If we join you, what can Brother Yifeng's guild provide? How are you going to help us increase the shelter's strength?" In truth, Blue Frost had thought of joining a guild force before. Many guild forces had come to recruit their District 1. However, if they joined one, it would have to be a formidable guild force. That way, they could strive for much more resources for themselves. Otherwise, they would be better off running the shelter without a guild. If you join Zero Wing, we will provide you with teleportation magic arrays so that you can save on travel time. Zero Wing will also provide you with funding and equipment and will train you all to be true experts, Shifeng said. Teleportation magic arrays? You guys actually managed to obtain that kind of item? Shock swept through the small crowd as they stared at Shifeng, their jaws practically hitting the floor. As far as they knew, teleportation arrays weren't available in this area. Even large shelters didn't have any. If their shelter had teleportation arrays, they could save so much time. With that advantage, it'd be difficult for their shelter not to grow stronger, even if they tried. Brother Yifeng, are you telling us the truth? Blue Frost asked excitedly. Don't believe me? Shifeng laughed. He then retrieved the teleportation magic array design from his bag, placing it on the table for all to see. Here, have a look at it yourselves. What? It's really a teleportation magic array design. Evening Lotus's eyes shone as she examined the forging design on the table. This item was more tempting than any weapon or piece of equipment. You've seen it for yourselves now. If you all are willing to join Zero Wing, we will provide your shelter with teleportation arrays. At that time, your shelter will develop at never-before-seen speeds. Becoming an advanced shelter will become possible, not to mention a large shelter, Shifeng said confidently. Just like the towns and cities in the outside world, the shelters in the Dark Den were categorized into ranks. There were small shelters, medium shelters, large shelters, advanced shelters, and more. As a shelter climbed the ranks, they would have access to more functions. However, it was not easy to upgrade a shelter's rank, as doing so required a large number of soul crystals. I understand. Since Brother Yifeng has such an optimistic view of District 1's shelter, my first party will join Zero Wing, Blue Frost said after considering the opportunity for a long moment. Since Blue Frost has agreed, my second party will join as well, Best Reincarnation said as he nodded. My third party will also join, Shallow Moon agreed. In just a short moment, the top 10 parties of District 1 all agreed to join Zero Wing. They were not fools. To put it simply, teleportation arrays were like strategic weapons to a shelter. If news of this got out, countless shelters would vie to join Zero Wing. Moreover, after seeing how powerful Shifeng was, they realized that the guild behind him would not be any ordinary existence. Chapter 598, Gaining Control over District 1. Chapter 598, Gaining Control over District 1. After gaining everyone's agreement, Shifeng handed out contracts to each party leader and vice leader. Not one of them was an ordinary player. They all were players at the top of District 1. Naturally, they would not join Zero Wing as normal members, but middle managers at the very least. And since they were going to become Zero Wing's middle managers, they needed to sign contracts. By the time Shifeng had arrived at this shelter, he had already considered establishing a Zero Wing guild branch here. The Dark Den was different from the outside world. Players here had a much easier time obtaining gemstones and Tier 1 taboo skills, as well as the specialties unique to various shelters. It was especially true for District 1's 100-berry wine. This was an extremely rare item that could help improve a player's compatibility rate. If this beverage were introduced to the outside world, it would help Zero Wing immensely in the future. Correspondingly, the development of life classes within the Dark Den was very slow. There were practically no players producing advanced products here. Particularly, consumables that players normally required to survive out in the fields were extremely hard to come by. These advanced consumables would certainly bolster the shelter's strength if he could supply them. The reason Fantasy Shrine had been able to develop so quickly in the past must be due to their trades with the shelter. Shifeng suddenly thought about the first-rate guild, Fantasy Shrine, which was located in the Black Dragon Empire. In the past, Fantasy Extinguisher had accepted this epic quest and turned Fantasy Shrine into one of the Black Dragon Empire's giants. Back then, even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's branch guild could not afford to provoke Fantasy Shrine casually. One could just imagine how helpful the trades between the two were to a guild. After everyone had looked over the contract Shifeng had provided, surprise colored their expressions. This Zero Wing sure is rich. It's offering a wage that's twice what other guilds offer. Just what kind of guild is this? Blue Frost had encountered many guild forces before. He had also heard of these guilds' reputations, and many of them were second-rate guilds. Unfortunately, although the wages these guilds offered District 1's top 10 parties were tempting, they required far too many soul crystals in return. Submitting to these guilds would only hinder their shelter's development. In the end, they rejected all the offers they had received. In comparison, not only was Shifeng offering wages that would allow them to play God's domain full-time, but he also intended to supply various advanced products to hasten their development. Most importantly, he did not require any soul crystals at all. This was astounding. Soul crystals were the foundation of shelters. It was one of the resources required that players required to grow stronger. If they could gain so many benefits without having to contribute any soul crystals, they'd willingly join as normal members, much less middle managers. If there aren't any issues, you can sign the contract. Shifeng involuntarily laughed as he saw everyone's dazed expressions. He had written this contract after taking into account the best interests of Blue Frost and the others. Not a single guild force could afford such an offer. Soul crystals might be important to Blue Frost and the others, but to Shifeng, these items held no value whatsoever. After Shifeng's reminder, everyone hurriedly signed their contracts. With the top 10 parties of District 1 joining Zero Wing, his guild would have control over the entire shelter. Previously, Shifeng had learned about shelter's development model. The top 10 parties of every shelter had special privileges. Aside from being able to purchase the shelter's specialties, these parties also had a say in the shelter's construction. They had the right to vote on which establishments they wanted to construct first. Take the Lion's Bar for example. Over half of the top 10 parties needed to agree before the Lion's Bar could be constructed. Meanwhile, in order to construct special buildings such as the Lion's Bar, players would have to use the soul crystals accumulated by the shelter. These accumulated soul crystals were what players normally exchanged for contribution shares. Hence, taking control of the top 10 parties of a shelter was the equivalent to taking control of the entire shelter. With District 1 as the center, Shifeng could then popularize the Candlelight Trading Firm's products to other shelters. Soon, the entire Evil Ghost domain would become Zero Wing's resource warehouse. At that time, Zero Wing's development speed would soar. Brother Frost, as the leader of First Party, you should be the most familiar with the shelter. Do you know of any methods to increase the 100-berry wine's production? Shifeng asked as he turned to Blue Frost. In the past, although the 100-berry wine had been extremely rare, Shifeng had still managed to procure some for himself. However, if District 1 could only produce 20 bottles per day, how could Fantasy Shrine have possibly afforded to sell it? The only possibility was that the supply of the 100-berry wine was not limited to this amount. However, the specialties available to every shelter were random. It was extremely rare for a shelter to obtain a specialty such as the 100-berry wine. Moreover, even with 10 shelters producing them, the total still wouldn't be enough to sate a single first-rate guild's demands, much less others' demands. I do know of a way to increase the 100-berry wine's production. Currently, the Lion's Bar is only a 1-star bar. If we promote it to a 2-star bar, then the production will increase to 50 bottles a day, 100 bottles a day if we can upgrade the bar to 3 stars. However, that will require a lot of soul crystals. With our shelter's current stock, it is impossible for us to promote the Lion's Bar. Blue Frost also wanted to increase the 100-berry wine's production. However, the soul crystal requirement was staggering. I see. It seems that it won't be possible in a short time. Shifeng frowned slightly. In truth, there is another method, Blue Frost suddenly said. Only, this method is very costly, and nobody is willing to do it. Let me hear it, Shifeng said. The Lion's Bar Independent Promotion. Through this method, the number of soul crystals required will decrease significantly. However, that would require spending your own money for everyone else's benefit. Also, the soul crystals spent will not gain you any contribution shares, Blue Frost explained. If we use the soul crystals that everyone has contributed, we will need 10,000 crystals to upgrade the Lion's Bar to 2-star status. Independently, only 500 will be required. However, even combining the soul crystals of all 10 parties, we still don't have 500 crystals. How many are you guys missing? Shifeng asked after giving the situation some thought. Based on our previous calculations, our parties only have slightly more than 300 soul crystals right now. We are short by almost 200, Blue Frost said, smiling bitterly. That's quite a lot. However, it is not an impossible task. Shifeng nodded and continued, let's do it this way. Frost, you try to buy as many soul crystals as possible for now. I'll try to obtain some myself as well. It is of utmost importance that we upgrade the Lion's Bar to 2 stars. Okay, I'll try my best. In truth, Blue Frost had considered upgrading the Lion's Bar independently as well. Only, before today, the 10 parties had not been of one mind. There would still be a few among them who would hold back some of their crystals, afraid that they would suffer if they lost too many. However, now that the top 10 parties of District 1 had become members of Zero Wing, they had become a family. With this, it would be much easier to do things like this. From this point onward, District 1's shelter would truly be united. After Shifeng finished arranging the matters relating to District 1's shelter, he departed from District 1, heading towards District 5. Chapter 599, Great Demon. Chapter 599, Great Demon. It had only been a day since Shifeng had left District 5. However, when Shifeng arrived at District 5's shelter once more, a massive change had occurred. What happened to the shelter? Shifeng was shocked when he saw the sight before him. The originally flourishing shelter of District 5 had become a pile of ruins. The tall walls which had surrounded the shelter were no more, and collapsed houses littered the area within what little walls remained. He could find no sign of anyone inside the shelter. The rotting corpses of various monsters decorated the spacious streets. Moreover, these monsters were all level 40 or above, far exceeding the level of this region. Among these monsters, a majority were elites. There were also plenty of special elites and chieftains as well. A lord. After entering District 5's shelter, on the second street Shifeng crossed, he discovered the corpse of a 3-story tall black bear. Nightmare bear, demonic creature, Lord rank. Level 40. HP 02-800-000. Even in the evil ghost domain, Lord-ranked monsters were extremely rare. Based on Shifeng's understanding, the monster armies that assaulted shelters every night almost never had any lords. The strongest monsters in these assaults were usually chieftains. Yet, right before him, Shifeng could see the corpses of 4 lords on the street. One could just imagine how intense this monster assault on District 5 had been. Just what happened here? Even after running down several streets, Shifeng still failed to discover any other players. It was as if District 5 had become a ghost city overnight. Normally, even when a shelter had been invaded, players would not retreat from the region so quickly. When Shifeng arrived at District 5 Central Street, players' screams reached his ears. This was not the first time Shifeng had heard such screams of pain. However, he had only heard them in the past. This was his first time hearing such a desperate and painful wail in this life. Shifeng then activated Windwalk and dashed towards the source of the cries. However, when Shifeng was 200 yards away from the source, his body suddenly felt extremely heavy. It was as if he had just jumped into a quagmire. Crap. This is a domain. Shifeng immediately jumped backward, retreating from the domain's range. Domain. It was something only high-tiered creatures were capable of using. Take Weissman, who was the magistrate of White River City and a Tier 4 Great Wizard, for example. He was capable of summoning a magic domain that would empower himself and suppress his enemies. If someone without a domain faced someone with one, unless they were far stronger than the latter, escape and death were the only available options. Meanwhile, one had to be at least Tier 4 to use a domain. In other words, there was at least a Tier 4 monster at the heart of this screaming. Since it was a player screaming, one could easily conclude that the Tier 4 creature was an enemy. Why would a Tier 4 creature be here? Shifeng was greatly surprised. Based on players' current levels, encountering such a creature should be impossible, not to mention in such a low-level region. Shifeng hurriedly jumped onto a collapsed rooftop and looked towards the origin of the screams. At this moment, 3 players were still alive on the central street. Discipline Paradise, someone Shifeng was familiar with, stood in the lead. The other two were a level 28 assassin and a level 28 berserker. At this moment, however, all three of their HPs were very low. All sorts of level 40 monsters surrounded them, making escape impossible. Worst of all, a pitch-black demon with bat-like wings and blood-red eyes hovered high above them. Nettle, demonic creature, great demon. Level 60. HP 50 000 000 50 000 What is a Tier 4 great demon doing here? Shifeng was astonished when he saw Nettle. Demons were enemies to the human race. As long as a demon appeared within God's domain, the armies of various countries throughout the continent would set out to exterminate them immediately. Hence, encountering a demon was rare, not to mention a great demon. Although Nettle was only a level 60 great demon, to current players, he was invincible. He was something players simply could not afford to provoke. Despicable human, I'll give you one last chance to live. Surrender the Moloch's ring that you stole and submit. Nettle glared down at Discipline Paradise and said coldly, otherwise, I will give you a taste of soul fire, destroying your soul just like your companions. Shifeng immediately sucked in a breath of cold air when he heard Nettle's words. To players, their souls were very important, and damage would bring about severe consequences. It was just like when Shifeng collected the immortal souls of players he killed, and as a result, said players were unable to log into God's domain for a short time. However, what he collected was only a small portion of a player's immortal soul. If soul fire burned a player's soul completely, the consequences would be unimaginable. This penalty would not be limited to being unable to play the game for a few days. If a player's soul were burned by soul fire, their account would be crippled. They would have no choice but to restart an account and obtain a new immortal soul. Just what kind of quest did Discipline Paradise take on for it to have such a frightening penalty? Shifeng's heart skipped a beat when he saw the black flame in the great demon's hand. Tier 4 creatures, particularly a Tier 4 great demon like Nettle, would not come here for no good reason. The only explanation Shifeng could come up with was a quest. Meanwhile, Discipline Paradise must have failed to complete this quest on time, and as a result, incurred such a punishment. This penalty was similar to the penalty of Shifeng's epic quest, Darkness Descends. You want me to submit? Not in a million years. I'll fight you to the end. Discipline Paradise shouted as he threw his shield at the great demon Nettle. Before the golden shield hit Nettle, however, the great demon effortlessly caught the flying shield with a single hand. Nettle lightly clenched his fist. Pang! With just a squeeze, a level 25 fine gold shield was crushed. To a Tier 4 creature, it was an easy task to destroy fine gold equipment. Only dark gold equipment could withstand its power for some time. The two players standing by Discipline Paradise's sides were immediately terrified. Since you aren't willing to become my servant, you can die. Nettle sneered. With a light wave of his hand, black flames rained down on Discipline Paradise. Discipline Paradise's group of three had no hope of defending against the rain of soul fire. Not only did their HPs rapidly deplete, but they also released agonizing wails due to the burning pain. The black flames devoured the trio for over a dozen seconds. Only when all three had turned to ash did the black flames disappear. This is going to be troublesome. A headache began to plague Shifeng. He had only managed to obtain the chapter of darkness after much difficulty. Yet, now, Discipline Paradise had accepted a horrible quest that was impossible to complete and was even forced to recreate his account. How was he supposed to go to the dark den right now? What's that? With his extraordinary vision, Shifeng discovered a flashing black light amidst Discipline Paradise's ashes. A ring. Suddenly, Shifeng recalled the Morlock's ring that the great demon Nettle had previously mentioned. That ring should be an item that would trigger a quest. Since it was a quest item, it naturally would not disappear with Discipline Paradise. Instead, it would remain and wait for the next player to come along. Is that ring somehow related to the Dark Den? Shifeng could not help but wonder. Before this, he had asked Blue Frost about the Dark Den. However, Blue Frost did not know anything. He had not known that the chapter of darkness could open the gate leading to the Dark Den either. No matter how one looked at it, it was impossible for the leading figure of District 1 to possess less information than Discipline Paradise. The only explanation was that Discipline Paradise had obtained this information through some special means. Moreover, Discipline Paradise had been very eager to get his hands on the Chapter of Darkness. Now, a great demon had appeared to retrieve a ring. If one were to claim that the ring and the Chapter of Darkness were unrelated, who would believe it? I can only give it a try. Shifeng gritted his teeth. He then dashed forward towards the ring with intense speed. Chapter 600 Ring of Legends. Chapter 600 Ring of Legends. After Shifeng crossed about a dozen yards or so, the great demon Nettle sensed his presence. Why is there still an ant? Go, finish him off. Nettle, who hovered in the air, commanded 5 level 40 chieftains to deal with Shifeng. In the great demon's eyes, a tier 1 player like Shifeng meant too little for him to take action personally. He had only killed Discipline Paradise personally due to the Moloka's ring. Otherwise, he would have let his subordinates finish off the Guardian Knight and the others. When 100 yards stood between Shifeng and the Moloka's ring, 5 massive black demonic bears surrounded him. Just in time. Shifeng smiled faintly. He then used silent steps on one of the demonic bears. Shifeng crossed a distance of 20 yards instantly. He then activated the aura of Wind's activatable skill, Wind Rider, his speed abruptly increasing by 220%. Transforming into a fierce gale, he easily shook off the 5 black demonic bears and continued his way towards the Moloka's ring. Not bad for a little ant. Nettle frowned. He stretched out his left hand. A ball of black flame bloomed in Nettle's black-scaled palm. Although this ball of black flame did not radiate any scorching heat, Shifeng could clearly feel how formidable it was. If the flame so much as touched him, he would instantly lose his life. You should feel honored to die by the great demon Nettle's, hand. Nettle then lightly waved his hand at Shifeng. Suddenly, a tidal wave of black flame washed down from the sky. Agonizing screams tore from the throats of any monster that encountered these black flames. The raging fire turned them into nothingness in the blink of an eye. Not daring to be careless, Shifeng soared into the sky, avoiding the black flames by the skin of his teeth. Despicable ant, you actually to dare dodge my attack. Nettle bellowed. In the next moment, countless black arcs of lightning appeared in his hand. Each arc was as thick as a person's thigh. The great demon then pointed at Shifeng, shouting, "Turn to ash." Immediately, the arcs of lightning formed a giant web that flew towards Shifeng faster than when he had Wind Rider activated. This was the Tier 4 skill the great demon Nettle was most proficient with, Dark Vortex. Not even a Tier 4 NPC could dodge this skill, they could only attempt to block it. As for players, they would die instantly. Is there a need to be this serious? Shifeng was rendered speechless as he saw the black electric net that had already surrounded him. I have to use my trump card. Shifeng no longer tried to dodge the black lightning, opting to charge towards it instead. Trying to kill yourself now that you know escape is impossible? Nettle smiled with satisfaction as he watched Shifeng's suicidal action. Boom! A thundering explosion occurred as Shifeng collided with the black electric net. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. Not even a level 40 chieftain could survive such a frightening attack. Just as the great demon was about to turn away, he suddenly discovered that something was amiss. A golden figure flew towards him. How is he still alive? Nettle stared at the unscathed Shifeng. While the great demon was surprised, Shifeng arrived at Discipline Paradise's ashes. His hand snatched Moloka's ring swiftly and placed the item in his bag. Despicable thief! You have truly angered me this time. A cold glint flashed in Nettle's crimson eyes. Suddenly, a blood-red battle axe with a thorn-covered handle appeared in Nettle's hands. With a flap of his wings, the great demon instantly appeared in front of Shifeng, swinging his battle axe down at the swordsman. Explosions shook the air as the axe descended. It was as if Nettle's powerful attack shattered space itself, and not even Shifeng could dodge or defend against the attack in time. Boom! When the blood-red axe struck Shifeng's body, he suddenly felt disembodied. After a fraction of a pause, The attack sent him crashing into a 4-story building over 30 yards away. What strength and speed! Shifeng exclaimed as he climbed out of the rubble. The great demon Nettle's strength was definitely at upper rank tier 4. If he had not switched the aura of wind to the aura of earth and activated absolute defense in time, even if he were a level 60 tier 2 sword master, that single hit would have obliterated him. Currently, although Shifeng had not received any damage, his entire body was numb. Even moving was difficult for him. The strength of a tier 4 great demon was simply too terrifying. Moreover, Nettle's strength wasn't just limited to his attributes. His techniques were similarly frightening. Nettle's simple swing had not contained any excess movements at all. The demon was operating at the same level as a top-tier expert. Against an opponent who possessed the attributes of a tier 4 class and the skills of a top-tier expert, even in his prime, Shifeng could only turn tail and run. Nettle could not help his surprise when he discovered that Shifeng was actually still alive. A tiny little ant had actually survived 3 of his moves. He had never encountered this in the past. Before the great demon could recover from his shock, Shifeng activated Phantom Kill. Suddenly, he turned and fled at maximum speed. You want to escape? Do you really think you can run from me, the great demon Nettle? Nettle revealed a malevolent smile. To the prideful great demon, the fact that Shifeng had provoked it repeatedly was humiliating. If others heard of this, he, the great demon Nettle, would watch his reputation in the dark den wither. Spreading his wings, Nettle transformed into a black streak of light as he chased after Shifeng. So fast. As expected of a winged tier 4 great demon. Glancing at the rapidly approaching great demon, Shifeng inwardly prayed that it would not discover his plan. Wind Rider only had a duration of 24 seconds. From the time he had activated Wind Rider until now, nearly 7 seconds had passed. He had also used up absolute defense already. If he wished to escape from the tier 4 great demon, his could only rely on diversions. At this moment, Shifeng's doppelganger hurriedly activated Blade Liberation and Wind Walk. The doppelganger then dashed in the opposite direction of Shifeng. None of the surrounding level 40 chieftains could keep up with the doppelganger's speed. In just a short moment, the doppelganger had shaken off all its pursuers. Roughly 5 seconds later, Nettle also caught up with Shifeng. Despicable human, I admit that you are very skilled. A little tier 1 swordsman like you has actually forced me, the great demon Nettle, to expend so much effort to deal with you. As a reward, I will grant you endless torture. You will become my puppet for the rest of eternity, Nettle shouted, a ferocious grin appearing on his face as he watched the currently motionless Shifeng. Oh, really? You'll have to catch me first, Shifeng replied disdainfully. Catch you? The great demon Nettle's expression sank as he suddenly discovered that the Shifeng before him had changed. Although the Shifeng before him had become stronger, his eyes were that of a puppet's. There was not the slightest sign of anger within those eyes. Damn. It's a doppelganger. Saying so, Nettle abruptly jumped into the air and returned to District 5. However, roughly 4 seconds after the great demon Nettle turned to fly back to the shelter, the originally emotionless Shifeng suddenly wore an angry expression. Shifeng had swapped positions with his doppelganger once more. The Abyssal Blade's Phantom skill could be an extremely powerful life-saving skill. As long as his doppelganger was still alive, Shifeng could swap positions with it indefinitely. With this move, even a tier 4 great demon should not think of killing him easily. Shifeng then changed directions and flew towards District 1. Even after Wind Rider's duration ended, the great demon could not find any trace of Shifeng. Finally safe. Shifeng, who currently hid in a forest, breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the great demon does not know my trump card. Otherwise, I really would have died. Hopefully, this Moloka's ring is worth all I went through to get it. Shifeng carefully retrieved the pitch-black ring, which was engraved with innumerable inscriptions, from his bag. Omniscient eyes. Shifeng examined Moloka's ring. Immediately, a shocked expression appeared on his face. Impossible. At this moment, even Shifeng did not dare believe his own eyes. Moloka's ring was actually a legendary item. Chapter 601 Legendary Quest. Chapter 601 Legendary Quest. Even after a long look, Shifeng still did not dare believe that what he was seeing was real. Legendary items were as rare as a phoenix's feather in God's domain, and not even Tier 5 players would necessarily possess one. Any player who owned a legendary item had the power to challenge opponents of a higher tier. Take Shifeng's fragmented legendary ranked Heavenly Dragon's Breath for example. When he activated Heavenly Dragon's power, he could contend with a Lord, which was the equivalent of a Tier 2 class, for a short time. If he possessed a legendary item, he could definitely contend with a High Lord. A Lord-ranked monster was merely the boss of a 20-man hard mode team dungeon. Meanwhile, a High Lord was the boss of a 50-man hard mode team dungeon. The difference in power was immense. If he could equip a legendary item now, not to mention a 50-man hard mode team dungeon, he could even lead a team in a 50-man hell mode team dungeon. He could even give a 100-man hard mode team dungeon a try. A team dungeon tested the overall strength of a team, while a legendary item was capable of increasing the overall strength of a team significantly. This was why legendary items were so frightening. They could break the limits of conventional strength. Unfortunately, although the information Shifeng had obtained regarding the Moloka's ring stated that it was a legendary item, it turned out that the ring was sealed. Moloka's ring, legendary rank. Sealed by the Lord of Balrog's, legend has it that this ring contains all of the Lord of Balrog's secrets and power. By wearing this ring, one can obtain this power. After Moloka's ring had been sealed away, the great demon Nettle stood guard over the item. The ring holds the great demon Nettle's mark, allowing the great demon to sense its location periodically. System: Legendary Quest Lord of Balrog's Fall activated. Quest details: lift the seal on Moloka's ring. Quest rewards: unknown. A legendary quest. Shifeng smiled bitterly. No wonder the penalty Discipline Paradise received was so severe. Just the penalty for failing an epic quest could half cripple a player's character, not to mention a legendary quest. However, I've never heard of this legendary quest before. The clues the quest provides are so limited, too. It says that I need to lift the seal on the ring, but it doesn't tell me how to do that. The ring doesn't provide any clues, either. It is no wonder Discipline Paradise failed the quest. Shifeng knew very well just how frightening a legendary quest was. A single epic quest had already given Shifeng such a huge headache, not to mention a legendary quest. However, God's domain was fair in all regards. If he could complete this legendary quest, the reward he could obtain would definitely be incredible. In God's domain, if a player wished to obtain a legendary item, they would have to do so by completing a legendary quest. However, a majority of the players that took this path normally ended up plunging themselves into a dark abyss. This was also why legendary items were so rare. If possible, Shifeng would rather not accept a legendary quest right now. After going through so much to get this ring, in the end, it still doesn't help me get to the dark den. Shifeng sighed. Currently, as long as he held onto this ring, a great demon would hunt him. Moreover, there was no definite time as to when the great demon Nettle would make his appearance again. This was far more dangerous than his epic quest, which provided a clear time limit. Shifeng stored Moloka's ring in his bag. Right now, completing the Darkness Descends quest was of the utmost priority. Just as Shifeng was about to leave his hiding spot, the sound of a system notification reached his ears. System: Moloka's ring has detected the presence of the power of darkness. Do you want Moloka's ring to devour the power of darkness? Devour the power of darkness? Shifeng was stunned. Giving it some thought, he could not recall there being anything important in his bag. He then clicked agree. In the next moment, the dozen or so soul crystals inside his bag disappeared. Meanwhile, due to having devoured the soul crystals, the inscriptions on Moloka's ring glowed slightly. System: First seal on Moloka's ring lifted. It's lifted, just like that. The sudden development rendered Shifeng speechless. He then examined Moloka's ring again. Moloka's ring, legendary rank. Sealed by the Lord of Balrog's, legend has it that this ring contains all of the Lord of Balrog's secrets and power. By wearing this ring, one can obtain this power. After Moloka's ring had been sealed away, the great demon Nettle stood guard over the item. The ring holds the great demon Nettle's mark, allowing the great demon to sense its location periodically. First seal lifted. A fragment of its power has been released. Power of darkness required to lift the second seal, 6/100. All attributes plus 10%. Fire resistance plus 30. Additional skill dash. Gate of Darkness opens a teleportation gate to the central area of the Dark Den. Duration 10 minutes. Cooldown 24 hours. Sure enough, the Dark Den and this ring are related, Shifeng stated, laughing. With this, I can head to the central area of the Dark Den. After Shifeng equipped Moloka's ring, he activated Gate of Darkness. Boom. The ground suddenly trembled as dark smoke slowly emerged from the forest floor. After a moment, the black smoke formed a pair of gates that was over 5 meters tall. There were countless golden runes engraved on the gates, radiating a frightening pressure. So powerful. This pressure can rival even that of a Tier 5 NPC. At this moment, Shifeng even found it difficult to breathe. He felt as if he were only an ant in front of these gates. However, when Shifeng tried to push apart open the gates, he suddenly discovered that they were locked. Rather, he noticed a small groove in the center of the gates. It seemed like a keyhole. So, that's the case. Originally, Shifeng had thought Discipline Paradise had been trying to trick him. Now, however, it would seem that he really did need the Chapter of Darkness to enter the Dark Den. He then placed the Chapter of Darkness into the groove. When Shifeng placed the black slate tablet into the groove, the golden runes on the gates suddenly linked with each other, releasing a golden brilliance. The gates began to open slowly. The instant the gates opened, Shifeng felt as if something were emerging from within the gates. His body suddenly felt incredibly heavy, and even taking a step forward was an extremely difficult task. Just what kind of place is this Dark Den? The pressure from behind these gates alone is enough to suppress my combat power to 1/10. Shifeng had not felt such fear when he was in the god's grave. Is there a god on the other side? However, Shifeng couldn't care less. Gritting his teeth, he gradually pushed his body forward, advancing to the other side of the Gate of Darkness. He did not have much time left. If he did not complete his quest soon, only a dead end awaited him. After Shifeng entered the Gate of Darkness, it seemed as if he had entered an entirely different space. A mountain, so tall that he could not even see its peak, loomed before him. He could also see many magnificent temples on the mountainside. These temples grew larger as one approached the top of the mountain. The temples at the foot of the mountain were merely 10 meters in height. The largest temple that Shifeng could see was over 100 meters in height. Other than their massive sizes, these temples also radiated a powerful divine might. While Shifeng was still overwhelmed by the sight before him, a figure suddenly flew down from the peak of the mountain. The figure descended with lightning speed, and in the blink of an eye, it appeared before Shifeng. My luck can't be that rotten, right? It's actually a Tier 5 fallen angel. Dread gripped Shifeng's heart as looked up at the enchanting woman, who had 3 pairs of pitch-black wings on her back, hovering above his head. Chapter 602, Time Limit. Chapter 602, Time Limit. Fallen angels were considered higher beings in God's domain, and they were born far stronger than ordinary beings. They were also known to be invincible against ordinary beings of the same tier. Even a Tier 5 expert with a Tier 5 taboo skill could only run when facing a Tier 5 fallen angel. I'm dead for sure this time. Shifeng could only reveal a bitter smile as he looked at the fallen angel hovering in the sky. He might have been able to escape a Tier 4 great demon, but against a Tier 5 fallen angel, he had no hope of resistance. Within a domain established by a Tier 5 being, even the 7 luminaries ring space movement would be useless, not to mention his other skills. As for competing in terms of speed, if he was not even a match for a Tier 4 great demon, how was he supposed to outmatch a Tier 5 fallen angel? In front of a Tier 5 fallen angel, even the Tier 4 great demon Nettle was an insignificant speck of dust. Human, it seems that you are quite courageous. Despite being only a Tier 1 swordsman, you have actually dared to steal Moloka's ring from Nettle, the fallen angel said, wearing a mischievous expression. She looked like a child who had just gained a new toy to play with. Before Shifeng could react, the fallen angel disappeared from the sky. By the time Shifeng realized what had happened, the charming fallen angel stood before him, her flawless white hand piercing Shifeng's heart. Instantly, Shifeng's HP, which was over 10,000, fell to 0. Is this the power of a Tier 5 fallen angel? Shifeng stared at his rapidly decreasing HP, shock filling his heart. Regarding both speed and power, the fallen angel was far more powerful than any Tier 5 players Shifeng had ever encountered. However, the fallen angel's combat standards were by far the most frightening. They were impeccable. There was not the slightest excess movement her actions. It was no wonder many experts in the past had paled whenever they spoke about fallen angels. Although Shifeng had already reached the flowing water realm, the second stage of the refinement realm, he was still far from reaching a state of perfection with his physical control. Only when he achieved a domain could he strive for such perfection. However, just how many players could achieve a domain in God's domain? At this moment, Shifeng felt quite fortunate as the fallen angel had not used any special moves to kill him. Rather, she had only needed an ordinary attack to finish him off. With this, he would only lose one level and some skill proficiency at most. Moreover, other than some items that would drop upon death, players would not drop any of their equipment when killed by monsters. What's going on here? When Shifeng opened his eyes, he discovered that he was still in the dark den after coming back to life. However, he had revived much further away from the towering mountain. If he wanted to head towards the mountain, he would have to run for more than half an hour. Normally, when a player died in a special map, they would revive back in a city. Since the Tier 5 fallen angel had killed him, logically, that should have been where he revived, in a city, yet he had revived out in the fields. Shifeng then hurriedly called up his attribute panel, checking his attributes and the contents of his bag. Good. I only lost a level and some skill proficiency. Shifeng released a sigh of relief. Regardless if he were level 33 or level 32, it did not matter too much to Shifeng. Just what is going on? Looking around, Shifeng suddenly discovered a golden avenue paved through the endless plains. There were also a countless monsters moving along this avenue towards the towering mountain. The monsters' levels varied greatly, with the lowest being level 10 and the highest being over level 100. A single glance told Shifeng that there were tens of thousands of monsters moving along the Golden Avenue. Moreover, these monsters consisted of a wide variety of races. The majority were not linked to the forces of darkness. Shifeng even spotted human NPCs. These NPCs also did not belong to the dark forces, and they looked more like adventurers. Like the monsters, the NPCs' levels ranged from level 10 to over level 100. Why are there so many human NPCs here? Shifeng was shocked. However, his shock did not stop him from quietly approaching the Golden Avenue. As a precaution, Shifeng activated Phantom Kill, sending his doppelganger ahead of him. Surprisingly, however, even after these monsters and NPCs noticed Shifeng's doppelganger, they showed no signs of aggression. When the doppelganger stepped onto the Golden Avenue, Shifeng received a system notification stating that he could not attack anyone while inside this region. There was no danger. With this, Shifeng relaxed. He then advanced towards the towering mountain along the Golden Avenue as well. He had only arrived at the Dark Den's central region after much difficulty. There was more than an 80% possibility of the Bible of Darkness being somewhere on the mountain. Shifeng had completed quite a few epic quests before. The Tier 5 fallen angel had only killed him with a normal attack. This proved that he had yet to fail the quest. It was possible that he had only incurred a punishment because he had used an incorrect method to enter the Dark Den. Otherwise, he would have truly been finished. If a Tier 5 fallen angel were guarding the Bible of Darkness, unless he were a Tier 6 God-ranked player, completing this epic quest would be impossible. Moreover, the fact that Fantasy Extinguisher had managed to complete this quest in the past proved that there was definitely some other way to scale the mountain and steal the Bible of Darkness. Arriving at the foot of the mountain, Shifeng discovered that the Golden Avenue led towards a massive altar. Above the altar, countless monsters fought viciously, tearing each other apart. Occasionally, victors would emerge from the ceaseless battles, holding a golden key. These victors would then scale the mountain, reaching Shifeng's original arrival point. Sure enough, my entry was flawed. After watching the situation for a while, Shifeng did not discover any high-tiered monsters guarding the mountain. There were also no Tier 5 fallen angels patrolling the sky. Very quickly, Shifeng arrived before the altar. The instant he set foot onto the altar, a system notification sounded out by his ears. System, defeat all enemies before you, and you will be given entry into the World Summit. System, you will gain 1 minute for every common monster killed, 10 minutes for every elite monster killed, 30 minutes for special elites, 100 minutes for chieftains, and 500 minutes for lords. System, you may choose 10 monsters to serve as your opponent. If you fail to defeat all of your opponents, you will die. System, you have 19 minutes to decide. Failure to do so will result in automatic forfeiture. You will die if you forfeit. I see. There is a restriction for entering the World Summit. It seems that I'll have to choose who my opponents carefully. Shifeng finally understood the gameplay here. However, if I only kill 10 common monsters, 10 minutes won't be long enough to explore all of the World Summit. I will most likely run out of time after traveling a short distance. No matter how he looked at it, an item like the Bible of Darkness would not be easy to find. It might even be at the very top of the mountain. He would not reach the top of the mountain even if he spent 10 hours traveling. However, if he chose monsters that were too powerful, he'd be at a disadvantage. On the off chance that he could not kill the opponents he selected, he would have truly dug his own grave. A lord was equivalent to 50 special elites or 5 chieftains. However, although a lord provided the most time, it was also the most difficult monster to take down. Moreover, if he had to face more than one lord simultaneously, the difficulty of the challenge would increase manifold. Yet, if he did not challenge high-ranking monsters, he would not have enough time to explore the World Summit. While standing on the massive altar, Shifeng pondered for a very long time. System, you have 1 minute to consider. Please make your decision as soon as possible. Chapter 603 S-Rank. Chapter 603, S-Rank. Time passed quickly, and Shifeng's head was spinning. This was a test meant to determine a player's understanding of themselves and their abilities. If a player overestimated their strength and skills, they might bring about their own deaths due to choosing monsters that were too strong. On the other hand, if they chose monsters that were overly weak, they might fail their quest due to having insufficient time. In other words, the more a player understood of their own strength, the more benefits they could obtain through this test. With berserk skills such as Heavenly Dragon's Power and Blade Liberation, although it was possible for Shifeng to kill a lord of the same level, the same did not true for a group of lords. Hence, Shifeng could not make this decision lightly. System, you have 30 seconds to consider. Please make your decision as soon as possible. I choose 1 lord and 9 chieftains, Shifeng said, finally deciding. System, opponents confirmed. Based on the analysis of your combat power, this test's difficulty is A rank. Once victorious, you will obtain a key that can be used to open shrine gates that are dark gold rank or lower. Do you wish to confirm your choice? Dark gold rank? Shifeng immediately felt that something was amiss. Hurriedly, he said, I wish to change my selection to 2 lords and 8 chieftains. His quest was epic rank. It was clear that he would not be able to obtain the Bible of Darkness if he could only visit dark gold shrines. He needed to be able to enter epic shrines. Otherwise, even if he won this battle, he would still fail his quest. System, opponents confirmed. Based on the analysis of your combat power, this test's difficulty is A rank. Once victorious, you will obtain a key that can be used to open shrine gates that are dark gold rank or lower. Do you wish to confirm your choice? Crap. Even with 2 lords, it still hasn't reached S rank. Shifeng inwardly cursed. Change my selection to 3 lords and 7 chieftains. Shifeng should be at his limit with 2 lords. There was only a 50% chance that he would emerge victorious from such a battle. If he faced 3 lords, based on his estimations, his success rate would be less than 20%. System: opponents confirmed. Based on the analysis of your combat power, this test's difficulty is S rank. Once victorious, you will obtain a key that can be used to open shrine gates that are epic rank or lower. Do you wish to confirm your choice? Confirm. Shifeng shouted, gritting his teeth. Hopefully, the lineup of these lords won't be too powerful. A moment later, 10 monsters appeared before Shifeng on the altar. 3 of them were lords, and 7 were chieftains. All 10 monsters were combat puppets of the same shape and size as an average player. In terms of attributes, however, they were leaps and bounds above Shifeng. Golden Puppet, Lord rank. Level 32. HP 1 600 0001 600 000. Silver Puppet, Chieftain rank. Level 32. HP 550 000 550 000. Good, my luck isn't that rotten after all. These puppets are all melees, and their HPs are quite low as well. I shouldn't have too many issues if I fight them from a distance. Shifeng released a sigh of relief. When the battle started, the 10 puppets began moving. Step by step, they slowly approached Shifeng, lacking the dexterity of a living creature. However, Shifeng did not dare to be careless. Immediately, he activated Heavenly Dragon's power, increasing his strength by 100% and defense and HP by 300%. Instantly, Shifeng's HP broke through the 30,000 threshold. Sure enough, lords were not that easy to deal with. The instant Shifeng activated Heavenly Dragon's power, the combat puppets dashed towards him, much faster than an ordinary chieftain and lord. The 10 combat puppets crossed the distance of 50 yards in the blink of an eye. The first to attack were the silver puppets, who thrust their spears at Shifeng. Following closely, the golden puppets unsheathed the twin swords slung over their backs. Without hesitation, Shifeng activated the Ice Blue Devil Flame and Black Emperor, holding nothing back. Deep blue flames covered Shifeng's entire body, raising his fire and ice damage by 40%. Shifeng then used Skywheel Sword, sealing the movements of all 10 combat puppets within a fixed perimeter. He followed up with a firestorm. Ice blue flames devoured the 10 combat puppets, dealing over -20,000 damage, or -40,000 damage with a critical hit, to all 10 puppets every second for 5 seconds. When the spell's duration ended, the 10 combat puppets had received over -100,000 damage each. Shifeng fully displayed the devastating might of the large-scale destruction spell. Meanwhile, Shifeng collected 30 stacks of death aura from this single attack. I'll get rid of one of you first. Shifeng then took out a bottle of 100-berry wine from his bag, drinking it. Instantly, his compatibility rate with his sword soared. Moving towards a silver puppet with less than 300,000 HP remaining, he used Phantom Kill, followed by Flame Burst. 24 consecutive strikes. 24 swords of light illuminated the altar. The silver puppet faded out of existence. Although Shifeng killed 1 silver puppet, the remaining 6 silver puppets and 3 golden puppets caught him in a pincer attack. With his most powerful burst skill exhausted, Shifeng used Thunder Flame Explosion to slow the remaining combat puppets, as well as deal over -10,000 damage to each. Due to his compatibility rate rising, he managed to achieve a 95% completion rate on Thunder Flame Explosion, reducing the movement speed of these combat puppets for over 10 seconds. Following which, he switched to the Aura of Wind, turning around and fleeing with his doppelganger. Facing 2 lords at the same time was already enough to overwhelm Shifeng, not to mention 3 lords and 6 chieftains simultaneously. With the Aura of Wind's movement speed increase and Thunder Flame Explosion's movement speed reduction, the silver puppets were unable to catch up with Shifeng. As for the golden puppets, although their speed allowed them to keep up with Shifeng, their occasional attacks caused their speed to drop sharply as well. As a result, it became impossible for them to surround Shifeng. Meanwhile, Shifeng activated 9 Dragon Slash, the 12 abyssal blade phantoms constantly assaulting the distant silver puppets. From time to time, Shifeng would also attack with the blazing meteor. Although damage from his ranged attacks caused was not as high as the abyssal blade, Each attack still dealt around -2,000 to -3,000 damage. Occasionally, Shifeng would also use Thundering Flash to inflict the damage amplification effect on the remaining 9 combat puppets. Shifeng also constantly expended the death auras he accumulated to reduce the cooldown of Thunder Flame Explosion, Thundering Flash, and other skills. Among them, he reduced the cooldown of Flame Burst the most. In such a way, Shifeng reduced the movement speed of all combat puppets while exterminating the silver puppets. From time to time, he would use Flame Burst to instant kill a silver puppet. In less than 2 minutes, Shifeng had annihilated all of the silver puppets. Only 3 golden puppets remained. However, these 3 golden puppets were inseparable. Shifeng could not find a chance to take them on one-on-one. Moreover, even though so much time had passed since the battle began, the 3 golden puppets were still at full HP thanks to their battle recovery. Even when Shifeng activated Wind Rider and managed to single out one of the golden puppets with his overwhelming speed, the remaining 2 would quickly catch up. As a result, Shifeng could only land a few hits before he was forced to retreat. This is troublesome. Although the golden puppets do not have any skills, the 3 of them are like a single entity, attacking and defending as one. Shifeng, who hovered in the air, frowned at the 3 golden puppets. The golden puppets were too powerful when working together. Moreover, the Heavenly Dragon's power's duration would end soon. At that time, even a battle of attrition would be difficult against the 3 golden puppets. "Do I have no other choice?" Shifeng muttered as he reluctantly retrieved an aqua-blue magic scroll from his bag. This was his greatest trump card, one that he never thought of using. Watching the remaining seconds of the Heavenly Dragon's power's duration tick by, Shifeng had no choice but to unfurl the aqua-blue magic scroll. Chapter 604, Time is Money. Chapter 604, Time is Money. Shifeng had prepared extensively to obtain the Bible of Darkness. His preparations included this aqua-blue magic scroll. Although lords were powerful, in the end, they were only Tier 2 monsters. It was only their high HP and damage, which were far superior to ordinary players, that made them so difficult to deal with. When Shifeng activated Heavenly Dragon's power, his attributes were no longer below that of a lord of the same level. With his superior dodging techniques and powerful skills, he could easily defeat a lord of the same level. However, with 3 golden puppets working seamlessly together, all Shifeng could do was dodge. As Shifeng unfurled the aqua-blue magic scroll, the surrounding water mana surged towards the paper. In a moment, the mana formed a massive, 6-star magic array. "Go!" Shifeng pointed at the 3 golden puppets. Suddenly, water surged from the 6-star magic array and swept over the bodies of the 3 golden puppets. In the blink of an eye, a small lake formed within an area of 50 yards. Although the water only reached the golden puppets' knees, the lake itself seemed to possess life as it formed dozens of water whips to bind the 3 lords. The 3 golden puppets desperately struggled to break free of these water whips. Facing a lord's power, these water whips snapped easily. However, the whips were seemingly endless. The moment one broke, another would immediately rise from the lake to take its place. As a result, it became extremely difficult for these golden puppets to move. "Give it up. You guys are only lords. Against a Tier 2 domain skill, Binding Current, you don't stand a chance," Shifeng growled, annoyed at the loss of the Tier 2 magic scroll. Zero Wing possessed quite a few Tier 2 magic scrolls. Yet, even among them, Binding Current was somewhat special. Binding Current was a domain skill, far rarer than even large-scale destruction spells. Although the skill did not have any attack power, it was capable of restricting enemies. Shifeng only possessed one such magic scroll. Once it was used, it would be very difficult to obtain another. Binding Current had a duration of 10 minutes. During these 10 minutes, all enemies within the domain would be bound by water currents, their movements greatly affected. Even Lord's strength would be significantly restricted while inside this domain. Die. Shifeng immediately struck a golden puppet. With the endless currents, the 3 golden puppets could no longer work in sync. This allowed Shifeng to focus his attacks on a single golden puppet safely. Chop! Thunder Flame Explosion. Thundering flash. Shifeng used one skill after another on the golden puppet. Due to Black Emperor, Shifeng could decrease his skill's cooldowns significantly. Shifeng's chop was practically without a cooldown. In addition, Shifeng the bottle of 100-berry wine allowed his skill completion rates to remain above 95%. Every time Shifeng used chop, he obliterated nearly 30,000 HP from the golden puppet. As a result, the golden puppet's 1,600,000 HP decreased at a rate visible to the naked eye. When the golden puppet's HP fell to 30%, Shifeng suddenly sensed danger. Hurriedly, he retreated by several steps. Boom! After backing up, a powerful impact slammed into Shifeng, sending him flying over a dozen yards backward. This is absolute domain. Shifeng was shocked. At this moment, a faint grey membrane surrounded the golden puppet with only 30% of its HP remaining. When the countless water whips collided with his grey membrane, they were immediately repelled, unable to enter the domain. Without the currents binding it, the golden puppet recovered its speed fully. In the blink of an eye, the golden puppet arrived before Shifeng and brandished its twin swords. The puppet's swords were like whips as they viciously assailed Shifeng. Just in time. Shifeng involuntarily smiled. As if he had long since seen through the golden puppet's intentions, he nimbly bent his body, allowing the whip-like swords to move over his body unhindered. The puppet's swords slid against Shifeng's body as they passed. However, they did not truly connect with Shifeng. Flowing water realm. Shifeng was like flowing water as he received the golden puppet's barrage, evading the countless sword lights smoothly. He would also occasionally strike back at the golden puppet, his attacks targeting the monster's joints. If the puppet were capable of using any other skills, Shifeng might really be in a predicament. However, since it could only use absolute domain, a skill that dispelled all control skills targeting its user, the golden puppet was no threat at all. In terms of power, he was not one bit inferior to a lord. As for speed, although he was slower than the golden puppet, he could make up for the gap with his dodging techniques. Moreover, even in the event that dodging was not possible, he could confront the puppet directly. He was not afraid of facing the lord in melee combat. After roughly a dozen seconds, Shifeng finally defeated one of the golden puppets. With the death of one golden puppet, Shifeng's concerns had gone out the window. His chances of victory instantly increased to more than 50%. He then proceeded to deal with the second golden puppet. When Heavenly Dragon's power's duration finally ended, Shifeng used the Tier 2 magic scroll, Scorching Saber, to finish off the second golden puppet. Shifeng glanced at Flame Burst's cooldown before shifting his gaze towards the final golden puppet. Smiling faintly, he muttered, "I can finally end this." After roughly 2 minutes of exhausting battle, Shifeng finally managed to wear down the golden puppet's HP to 1 million. Not wanting to waste any more time, Shifeng activated Blade Liberation, increasing both his strength and agility attributes by 90%. He then proceeded to torture the last golden puppet to death. Compared to when he had activated Heavenly Dragon's power, his attacks dealt slightly less damage. However, due to his increased attack speed, his total damage was higher than before. When the golden puppet was about to activate its absolute domain, Shifeng activated his ultimate skills, Flame Burst and Dragon Breath, killing the golden puppet, which only had 30% HP remaining, instantly. When the battle ended, the sound of a system notification rang out by Shifeng's ears. System, you have completed the S-rank difficulty test. Rewarding Epic Shrine Key. You have received 2,200 minutes. After the test ended, Shifeng did not rush towards the mountain. Instead, he chose to rest for a moment. When Blade Liberation ended, he would enter a weakened state for 3 minutes. Moreover, he had no idea of what to expect on the mountain. Since he had already qualified to enter the World Summit and was not in a hurry, he could take the chance to recover his mental state. After all, high-intensity battles were very taxing on the mind. He could also take this opportunity to wait for the Heavenly Dragon's power's cooldown to end. This test alone has forced me to use so many of my hidden cards. Just what awaits me on the mountain? Shifeng could not help but shudder whenever he recalled the Tier 5 fallen angel that had appeared before him. 3 hours passed quickly. Holding the purple gold key, Shifeng arrived before the gates to the World Summit. The moment Shifeng set foot on the World Summit, the time he had obtained through the test began to count down. No monsters. Shifeng muttered, confused. He was not in a hurry. Examining his surroundings, other than the 10-meter tall shrines, nothing hindered his path. Shifeng then activated Windwalk and ran towards the nearest 10-meter tall shrine. The stone doors in front of the dazzling golden shrine were shut tightly. When Shifeng touched the stone doors, the sound of a system notification reached his ears. System, Epic Shrine Key detected. You are qualified to open the doors of this bronze shrine. Do you wish to spend 50 minutes to open them? Crap. Opening the shrines requires time? Originally, Shifeng thought he would have sufficient time to search for the Bible of Darkness. With this new development, however, that notion had changed. However, Shifeng had no idea as to what was inside these shrines. He needed a better understanding so that he could face any future developments. Open the doors, Shifeng said, gritting his teeth. Chapter 605, Player's Paradise. Chapter 605, Player's Paradise. After Shifeng confirmed his decision, the heavy stone doors slowly parted. Meanwhile, Shifeng's remaining time in the World Summit instantly decreased by 50 minutes. When he entered the shrine, he was greeted by a staircase that led to the top of the shrine. Engraved runes and pictures decorated the staircase's walls. Among them, there were even images of gods before the Great Destruction. Shifeng ascended the shrine's staircase, step by step. In the beginning, Shifeng had not felt anything out of the ordinary. However, by the time he was halfway to the top, he felt something off. Why has the gravity here increased? Shifeng's physical control was quite strong. As he took another step up, he felt the gravity increase by 10%. Although the gravity had only increased from 1 to 1 g, this small change would affect his skill completion rates, resulting in a decrease in his combat power. However, since Shifeng had already entered the shrine, he had no intentions of leaving. If he could not even overcome a single bronze shrine, obtaining the Bible of Darkness would be a pipe dream. Shifeng continued to ascend, step by step. However, he was no longer as fast as before, as with every 10 steps, the gravity increased. And with each change, Shifeng needed some time to adapt. By the time Shifeng reached the top of the shrine, the gravity had shifted to 4 g. Exposed to such an intense shift, even Shifeng was significantly affected. The room at the top of the shrine was not large. It was roughly the size of a basketball court. Aside from a black stone coffin in the room's center, the area was empty. Shifeng approached the center of the room. When he was 10 yards away from the stone coffin, golden runes suddenly emerged on its black surface. A moment later, a golden magic array began to expand from the stone coffin, enveloping Shifeng with it. A barrier. Shifeng glanced at his surroundings. Golden, translucent walls enclosed the area around him, trapping him with the stone coffin. Just as Shifeng considered his escape options, a semi-transparent figure materialized inside the barrier. This figure was actually Shifeng himself. Both the figure's appearance and apparel were exactly like his own. Shrine Guard. Level 32. HP 20 00020 000. Am I supposed to defeat him? Shifeng frowned at the Shrine Guard, his expression becoming somewhat solemn. Shifeng only required one critical hit to finish off the Shrine Guard's 20,000 HP. However, he did not dare to casually approach the Shrine Guard because, currently, his intuition warned him that, should he approach the guard, only death awaited him. Shifeng was a player that was capable of defeating a lord by himself, yet, against this Shrine Guard, who only had 20,000 HP, he was utterly helpless. Are you too scared to approach me? The Shrine Guard asked, laughing. Shifeng could not help his shock when he heard the Shrine Guard's human-like speech and behavior. In his memories, only high-tiered NPCs were capable of such performances. He had never heard of a common monster behaving like this. It was obvious that the shrine guard was an extraordinary existence. I don't have a death wish. Shifeng shook his head, growing more certain of his intuition's warning. Not bad. You have actually discerned the gap in strength between us. However, rest assured, since you have already made it here, there is no danger. On the contrary, I have a reward for you, the shrine guard said, laughing. Reward? What kind of reward? Shifeng did not think that an NPC would trick him, and there was no need to do so. This NPC was certainly far stronger than himself. The shrine guard could simply kill him if he wanted to. I will help you become stronger. The shrine guard then explained, I can offer you guidance on one swordsman skill. How much you learn depends on you, of course. However, you don't have much time left. You only have 49 minutes remaining. Guidance on a swordsman's skill. Shifeng was surprised. When he thought back to the price required to enter the bronze shrine, he immediately understood. Hurriedly, he said, I would like you to give me pointers on chop. Shifeng had plenty of swordsman skills. However, there were some he used frequently and some he only used occasionally. Among them, he used chop most often. Although his magic weapon had allowed his skill completion rate to rise significantly, he was still far from achieving a 100% skill completion rate. You've made a wise decision. Watch me carefully, then. The shrine guard nodded. He then began to flow through the motions of chop. The shrine guard's body leaned forward and swung the abyssal blade in his hand. The abyssal blade then began to blur. In the next moment, it was as if the space in front of the shrine guard broke as a faint spatial crack appeared. The shrine guard's chop was completely different than Shifeng's. How is this possible? Shifeng was at a loss for words. His skill completion rate with chop was over 95%, and he was extremely close to reaching perfection. However, whenever he used chop, it always appeared in the form of 3 sword lights resembling full moons that gathered at a single point. However, these 3 sword lights did not appear when the shrine guard used chop. From the beginning, there had only been a single sword light. Moreover, the shrine guard's swing had not been particularly fast, so Shifeng could see the skill being executed very clearly. However, the most frightening aspect was the power the shrine guard's chop had displayed. Shifeng could sense that the shrine guard's strength and constitution and his own were exactly the same. The only difference was that the shrine guard had slightly more HP. Yet, the shrine guard's chop could tear apart space itself. Although the spatial crack that had formed seemed very small, the might it contained was sufficient to kill him instantly. Despite the shrine guard's speed and power being ordinary, he was actually able to display such frightening power. Confused, the shrine guard asked, smiling. Emichem. Shifeng nodded and admitted shamelessly. No matter what was said or done, he was a top-tier expert in God's domain who had reached the flowing water realm. Although he still could not compete with those apex experts in the past, he was not that far away from reaching their level. Yet, the chop the shrine guard had executed shattered his conception of the skill known as chop. If you don't understand, I will display the skill a few more times. You can also experience it for yourself. Rest assured, while inside this barrier, you will not receive any damage. The shrine guard spoke like a teacher who guided his student carefully. Hearing this, Shifeng quickly sought the shrine guard's guidance. If one wished to improve on their techniques, the fastest way to do so was through actual combat. Previously, he had kept a distance between himself and the shrine guard, worried that the NPC would kill him. Now that he knew the NPC intended to help him improve his ability with the skill, he would not hold back. Immediately, he displayed his best chop and began battling the shrine guard. Since Shifeng attacked him, the shrine guard replied with a chop of his own. When the 2 swords collided, sparks flew into the air around them. Peng! In one moment, Shifeng sent a chop at the shrine guard, and in the next moment, his body left an imprint on the barrier's wall. There was even a faint spatial crack lingering in Shifeng's original position. Is this a super-perfect skill? Shifeng stared at the shrine guard with a stupefied expression. His mind replayed the shrine guard's sword swing. Regarding speed, Shifeng was definitely the victor. Moreover, he had prepared to dodge the NPC's attack beforehand. However, Before he had any chance to dodge, the shrine guard's sword had collided with his own. He instantly felt a tremendous power flow into his hand. In the next moment, he had been thrown backward. Shifeng was still badly shaken by the shrine guard's attack. Fortunately, this was only a lecture. Otherwise, the NPC's attack might have really killed him. He and the shrine guard were worlds apart from each other. Perfect, the shrine guard laughed. Nothing is perfect in this world. It is only because your vision is limited, and you are confined to your own world. Nothing is perfect. Shifeng thought about the skill completion rate's limit of 100%. Yet, the shrine guard had said that nothing was perfect. Could the skill completion rate possibly exceed 100%? The more Shifeng thought about it, the more he felt it was possible. Otherwise, why would his chop, which neared a 100% completion rate, be so inferior to the shrine guard's? Following which, Shifeng faced off against the shrine guard again and again. Although every exchange ended in Shifeng's utter defeat, the more Shifeng fought, the more his excitement grew. He felt as if he had caught onto something that he had never noticed before. He had laced too much importance on his body, trying too hard to replicate a skill's template motions that had been provided by the system. He had forgotten to think outside of the box. As Shifeng traded blows with the shrine guard, his skill completion rate continued to rise. 96%. 97%. 98%. It should feel like. Shifeng leaned forward. He no longer pursued ultimate speed as he swung his sword along the air's resistance. Suddenly, a spatial crack appeared before him. Chop's skill completion rate reached 101%. Chapter 606 Epic Shrine. Chapter 606 Epic Shrine. This is a really wonderful feeling. When Shifeng looked at the black fissure before him, he could not help but recall the sensation he felt when he drew his sword before. Unfortunately, he had only achieved this super-perfect completion rate accidentally. Trying to grasp this feeling was akin to trying to catch a dream. Just as Shifeng was about to commence another bout with the shrine guard, the sound of a system notification suddenly entered his ears. System, active duration of the shrine has ended. Player will be sent out of the shrine in 3 seconds. Time's up already? Shifeng could not help his surprise. He felt as if he had fought against the shrine guard for only a short while. He still had many questions he wished to gain answers to. Yet, before he realized it, 50 minutes had already elapsed. By the time Shifeng snapped out of his daze, he was already back outside the gates of the bronze shrine. Shifeng still wanted to enter the shrine again. However, the system notified him that he had already opened this shrine once before and that he would have to wait another 7 days before he could open it again. Truly a pity. If I were to practice there for a few more hours, I might be able to grab a hold of that feeling, Shifeng silently lamented. In God's domain, whether it be a player's combat techniques or skill usage, both were learned through self-experimentation. There was no teacher to guide players on these topics. The system only provided a holographic video of the template motions of a skill. The rest was up to the players themselves to experiment and practice. Having someone specially teaching them how to use their skills was definitely a heaven-sent opportunity. After all, having a guide was far more efficient than groping for answers in the dark. The learning speed would definitely be more than 10 times faster. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many players who couldn't achieve a 100% skill completion rate. I wonder what kind of rewards the other shrines have. Expectations welled up inside Shifeng. Just a single bronze shrine had provided him with such a guidance reward. What would the mysterious iron, secret silver, fine gold, dark gold, and epic ranked shrines have in store for him? Thinking up to this point, Shifeng no longer wasted any more time. He immediately activated Windwalk and dashed towards the peak of the world summit. Shifeng could determine the rank of a shrine based on its location on the world summit. The higher the rank of a shrine, the closer to the pinnacle it lay. However, the world summit was simply too massive. It was many times larger than White River City. Despite continually alternating between Windwalk, Wind Rider, and Speed Scrolls, Shifeng had reached only the middle section of the world summit after running for 3 full hours. He still couldn't see the peak of the mountain from where he stood. On the other hand, the shrines at the foot of the mountain were no more than little dots in his eyes now. I have managed to reach the area of the fine gold shrines only after 3 hours, that's 6 special elite kills gone. Even if an expert player were to come here, they would not be able to obtain the reward of the fine gold shrines. Shifeng had tried checking one of the fine gold shrines earlier, and it required him to spend 200 minutes just to open it. It should be known that the current elite players of God's domain were only capable of contending against an elite monster of the same level, while ordinary experts were capable of opposing up to a special elite of the same level. Only first-rate experts could fight a chieftain of the same level. As for top-tier experts, they were capable of contending against a lord of the same level. In order to arrive at this place and open the doors of a fine gold shrine, a player would need to defeat 2 chieftains and 8 special elites, obtaining 440 minutes, at the very least. In other words, an extremely powerful first-rate expert would barely be able to open the doors of a fine gold shrine and obtain the reward stored within it. I have only reached the middle section of the mountain. Just how long do I have to continue running to reach the epic rank section? Shifeng grew somewhat worried. Shifeng discovered that the distance between shrines also grew wider the further up he went. He had only reached the edge of the fine gold shrine area right now. He still had to traverse the dark gold area to arrive at the epic area. He also had to spend time searching for the right epic shrine. Moreover, he had obtained the epic shrine key by the skin of his teeth. He had no idea how much time was required to open the doors of an epic shrine. In the off chance that he did not have enough. This place really is damnable. I can't use the aura of space's spatial movement here. Only the aura of wind's speed increase and Wind Rider are of some help. The rules of the World Summit were thoroughly exasperating. If Shifeng could use spatial movement here, he could travel a distance of 400,000 yards in just 1 second, saving him hours in travel time. Time passed by quickly. After running for another 5 hours, Shifeng finally arrived before a shrine that was over 300 meters in height. The shrines around this area were completely different from the ones he had seen before. This is an epic shrine, Shifeng muttered as he looked at the mountain-like shrine. The shrines he encountered before were all inanimate objects. On the other hand, the epic shrines here had frightening auras. Shifeng even began to wonder whether terrifying monsters lived in these shrines. Done admiring the shrine before him, Shifeng walked up and touched its doors. System, epic shrine key detected. You are qualified to open the doors of the epic shrine. Do you wish to spend 1,000 minutes to open them? 1,000 minutes? Shifeng breathed out a sigh of relief. I still have slightly more than 1,600 minutes right now. I will have plenty of time remaining even after I open an epic shrine. I should be able to locate the shrine storing the Bible of Darkness within 600 minutes. The World Summit had a large number of shrines, and the same held true even for epic shrines. Shifeng counted 9 epic shrines just within his range of vision. There were also plenty more up above. He guessed that the total number of epic shrines on the World Summit exceeded 100. These shrines were different from each other. There was a huge difference just in terms of the elemental mana surrounding these shrines. Some shrines released bright and dazzling elemental mana, and others released flaming elemental mana. Even shrines that released the same type of mana would have different images engraved on their doors, images of angels, demons, and many other races. Some shrine doors even depicted gods. Hence, Shifeng would not have difficulty looking for the shrine that contained the Bible of Darkness, so long as he had sufficient time. The Bible of Darkness is a treasure of the demon race. It should be stored in one of the demonic shrines of the darkness element. Although Shifeng had little understanding of the World Summit, he knew quite a lot regarding mana. A curse was categorized as a darkness skill. Since it was a great demon who had cursed him, the great demon knew how to cast darkness spells. This meant that the Bible of Darkness had to be related to a shrine of the darkness element. With a target in mind, Shifeng quickly began his search. Very easily, he had managed to locate 5 darkness shrines. Among them, Only 2 belonged to the demon race. Meanwhile, of these 2 shrines, one belonged to the Lord of Destruction, while the other belonged to the Lord of Nightmares. The Bible of Darkness was a descriptive record of all demons written by the Lord of Destruction. Rumor had it that as long as one managed to control the Bible of Darkness, they would become the Lord of Demons, with all demons obedient to their commands. Without hesitation, Shifeng opened the Lord of Destruction's shrine. When the black stone doors parted, an ancient aura washed over him. Shifeng could feel the origin of destruction contained within this aura. The pressure he felt coming from within the shrine was far more powerful than what he had felt from the Tier 5 fallen angel he encountered before. Amazing. It is only a shrine. There is clearly no living being inside, yet it gives off such an overwhelming pressure. As expected of the Lord of Destruction's shrine, Shifeng exclaimed, "Heavenly Dragon's power, activate." The immense pressure made even walking a difficult task for Shifeng. However, after activating Heavenly Dragon's power, the weight pressing down on him lessened significantly. He was then able to enter the shrine with relative ease. Chapter 607 Magic Device. Chapter 607 Magic Device. The moment Shifeng stepped into the shrine, it was as if he had arrived in another world. He could hear the chirping of birds and smell the fragrance of flowers. Verdant trees and grass filled his vision. Instead of a shrine, this place looked more like a garden. Fallen angel. Inside the garden, Shifeng immediately discovered the fallen angel that had killed him previously. 3 pairs of pitch-black wings, a perfect, enchanting body, long and slender legs, as well as that jade-white skin and flawless face. Of all the women Shifeng knew, only the great divine official Charlene was a match for this fallen angel. Any other woman standing before her would simply pale in comparison. "Human, you sure are fast," the Tier 5 fallen angel giggled as she looked at Shifeng with her aquamarine eyes. "You adventurers are truly blessed by the heavens, being born with an immortal soul. Even we would find it difficult to thoroughly kill you adventurers." Even until now, Shifeng still got chills whenever he thought back to how the fallen angel had killed him instantly. Most likely, only a few players throughout the entire God's domain could rival that near-perfect combat technique. If he had not known that only rewards and no punishments awaited him inside these shrines, he would have long since fled this shrine. "My name is Serena. Come over. You entered the World Summit normally this time, so I won't kill you," Serena laughed as she beckoned Shifeng with her hand. "Since you've managed to make it to this place, it shows that you indeed possess some ability. I can give you 2 options." "2 options?" Shifeng asked curiously. "Though I say options, in reality, they are just 2 reward methods." Serena nodded lightly. "The first option is obtaining the Bible of Darkness that is stored in this place directly. The second option is undertaking a small test. Through the second option, you will not only obtain the Bible of Darkness but also have a chance to win these items." Serena waved her hand lightly. Suddenly, 3 rainbow treasure chests appeared in midair. The first rainbow treasure chest contained a large number of soul crystals. A simple glance told Shifeng that there were over 100 crystals at the very minimum. In the dark den, the soul crystal was the foundation of all development. A sudden infusion of more than 100 soul crystals would definitely increase a shelter's strength significantly. The second rainbow treasure chest contained a black stone tablet that looked similar to the Chapter of Darkness. However, the name displayed was Chapter of Shelter. It could be used to immediately promote a shelter by a single rank, up to a maximum of large shelter. There's such a good item available as well. Sure enough, the rewards of an epic shrine are astonishing. Shifeng grew very excited when he saw these 2 rewards. Promoting the shelters found inside the dark den was extremely difficult. Besides the astronomical number of soul crystals required, players also needed to complete a series of quests in order to promote a shelter. The manpower and resources necessary to do so were extremely daunting. Even the shelter at District 1 had yet to be promoted to a large shelter until now. One could just imagine how difficult a feat it was. Only a shelter supported by a large guild was capable of becoming a large shelter after amassing all the resources collected by the multiple shelters controlled by said guild. Once he obtained the chapter of shelter, he could immediately upgrade a medium shelter to a large shelter. This would be of immense help for District 1's shelter, which was under Zero Wing's control. However, when Serena opened the third rainbow treasure chest, Shifeng was thoroughly stupefied. Magic device forging design. Shifeng's eyes turned bloodshot as he looked at the dilapidated design inside the treasure chest. He could not help but wish he could snatch it up right away. "Oh, I did not think that a human like you would know about this item. Since you know about magic devices, then you must know what a magic device forging design represents. Its value is only slightly lower than the Bible of Darknesses. You humans, however, would probably appraise the design more highly." The fallen angel Serena smiled in satisfaction upon seeing Shifeng's reaction. "Say it, then. Which reward do you choose?" At these words, Shifeng fell silent. A product of God's domain's magical civilization when it was at its peak, the magic device represented the pinnacle of alchemy, forging, and engineering combined, as well as the end of the era of the gods. Even the lowest-ranked bronze magic device boosted a player's strength to a whole new level, not to mention a magic device forging design. Even the lowest-ranked bronze magic device forging design could provoke a war between guilds. In the past, when a mysterious iron magic device forging design had appeared, over a dozen countries and more than 100 guilds had fought over it. Multiple super guilds had also participated. The death toll for that war was innumerable. A rough estimation had pegged it at 5 million. In the end, a super guild had emerged victorious. As for Shadow, which had been a second-rate guild back then, it had not dared to even participate in the war. It could only stand on the sidelines and watch. Now that a magic device forging design appeared right in front of him, how could Shifeng not grow excited? Magic devices were similar to the mana armor kits. In the magic device's case, however, it did not increase any basic attributes. Instead, it was mounted on a weapon to increase the weapon's strength. Every weapon could only mount one magic device. After God's domain underwent its third evolution, whether it was a battle against players or against monsters, an injury would reduce a player's combat power. And while players could rely on heals to recover from their injuries, the deterioration of their weapons was inevitable. It was especially true when players fought against high-ranking monsters. Unless one's weapon was of high quality, players would have great difficulty injuring a lord and reducing its combat power since lords had skin that was as hard as steel. Meanwhile, a magic device could be used to strengthen a weapon. Not only could it make a weapon sharper, but it could also bestow special effects such as reduced weight, increased weight, hardness, mirage, paralysis, and other effects that could improve a player's combat power significantly. Most importantly, magic devices were not consumable items. Like inlaid gemstones, they could be taken off the weapons they were mounted on. Whether it was a level 1 common weapon or a level 200 epic weapon, players could freely transfer their magic devices between them. This was the reason why players were so attracted to magic devices. However, magic devices were extremely difficult to produce. Hence, production volumes were very low. Even after reaching level 100, most players still did not have their own magic devices. In the past, as the guild leader of a second-rate guild, Shifeng owned only a mysterious iron magic device, even after he was over level 100. As for other independent experts, they possessed only bronze magic devices. If he could obtain a magic device forging design right now, it would definitely become one of Zero Wing's trump cards. "Have you come to a decision?" Serena asked, smiling as she flourished the magic device forging design in her hand. "Time waits for no one. You only have 3 minutes to decide. If you do not give me an answer, I will take it as you picking the first option, and you may leave once you obtain the Bible of Darkness." "To hell with it." Shifeng looked at the fallen angel, a passionate flame burning in his heart. "I choose the second option." Both the chapter of shelter and the magic device forging design were items that were not easily acquired. The difficulty of obtaining the magic device forging design was even above that for an epic item. Otherwise, Magic devices wouldn't have been so rare in the past. Good. I knew you were a smart man. Let's begin, then. Serena smiled in satisfaction. She then waved her hand. The entire garden promptly vanished, and replacing it was a volcanic hell. Molten magma surrounded a 40-yard area of solid ground. The ambient temperature was scorching hot. Any ordinary player would most likely broil to death slowly. Only someone like Shifeng, who possessed high fire resistance, could stay in this place for long periods of time. Meanwhile, the gravity here had also increased to 3G, which would greatly affect a player's mobility. Come, then. If you can defeat me, you win, Serena said, smiling as she looked down at Shifeng from midair. Chapter 608, Tier 2 Taboo Skill. Chapter 608, Tier 2 Taboo Skill. Originally, Serena had anticipated seeing a look of horror on Shifeng's face. However, even after she had revealed the contents of the test, Shifeng did not evince any shock. On the contrary, it seemed as if he felt that the test was totally reasonable. Don't you feel surprised that the final test actually requires you to defeat me? Serena asked, a perplexed expression on her face as she looked at Shifeng. A Tier 1 human against a Tier 5 fallen angel. With such a massive gap, even a person with a stable mentality would feel despair. And if not despair, then at the very least, anger, as this was obviously not a fair contest. Yet, Shifeng remained unfazed by this revelation, so how could she not be surprised? Since the rewards are so bountiful, I naturally prepared for the worst. Not to mention, I really don't have a choice, do I? Shifeng laughed, a helpless smile on his face. There were no free lunches in God's domain. Not to mention, the rewards of the test were of such a frightening caliber. It seems that you understand the rules of the world quite well, so it wasn't just luck that prompted you to pick the second option. Serena squinted her aquamarine eyes slightly as she looked at Shifeng. At this moment, she no longer looked down at the human before her. Curling her blood-red lips into a seductive smile, she continued, if you had chosen the first option, then the Bible of Darkness you would have received would have been a replica. As for the second option, while you may fail the test, you will still obtain the real Bible of Darkness regardless. Although Shifeng had guessed that this was the case, he inwardly felt relieved to hear these words directly from the fallen angel herself. When all was said and done, the Bible of Darkness was a treasure left behind by the Lord of Destruction. How could it possibly be that easy for players to acquire it? Since you are already clear on the situation, I will explain the rules of the test. Serena raised her brows slightly and continued in a low tone, the rules are very simple. You will not die while inside this area. Both our strengths will also be suppressed to Tier 1. It will be your win as long as you are able to defeat me in the remaining time you possess. Both suppressed to the standard of a Tier 1? Shifeng frowned. Although both their strengths would be suppressed to the standard of a Tier 1 class in the upcoming test, fallen angels were higher beings. Not only were they born much stronger than other beings, but they also wielded many more skills. Even at Tier 1, Serena's combat power would most likely be at the peak of an ordinary Tier 2 class or above. She was stronger than even a High Lord of the same level. There was actually a possibility that her combat power approached that of a Great Lord. If there are no problems, you may begin attacking as much as you want. Serena smiled faintly as she sent Shifeng a teasing look. Rest assured, I'll make sure to hold back plenty. I also won't use any Tier 3 or Tier 4 skills. Despite Serena's reassurance, Shifeng had no intention of attacking her just yet. Even without using Tier 3 or Tier 4 skills, a Tier 1 fallen angel can still kill me easily using Tier 2 skills. He smiled bitterly as he took in Serena's leisurely attitude. Shifeng had a very clear understanding of his own strength. Although he had grasped plenty of powerful skills, they were all Tier 1 skills. As for Tier 2 magic scrolls, while he had quite a few on him right now, his opponent had Tier 2 skills, which she could use indefinitely. The only trump card he had was twofold Berserk. If he activated Heavenly Dragon's power and Blade Liberation simultaneously, he would gain the ability to contend against a High Lord for a short period of time. However, Engaging a Tier 1 fallen angel in melee combat was simply suicidal. I have close to 10 hours left. It would be pointless to charge into battle right now. My only option is to wait for the cooldown of Dragon's power to end. Shifeng was in no hurry. He then sat on the ground, resting as he quietly observed the fallen angel before him. Earlier, when he was entering the shrine, he was forced to use Heavenly Dragon's power to resist the intense pressure. If he fought Serena, a fallen angel who had the attributes of a High Lord, without twofold berserk, he would just be seeking his own death. Fortunately, the condition to clear the test was only to defeat Serena, not to kill her. There was a massive difference between these two conditions. Defeat meant that he was only required to cause a certain amount of damage to Serena. After all, even if Serena simply stood still and allowed him to attack her freely, he would not be able to kill her within 20 seconds. Currently, although Serena was only level 32, she had a total of 5 million HP. Tier 1 skills are definitely useless against Serena. In terms of combat techniques, she is also far superior to me. If I wish to defeat her, my only option is to rely on Tier 2 magic scrolls. Although Shifeng had his ultimate skill, Flame Burst, this skill was meaningless if his weapon could not connect with his opponent. Not to mention, in a direct clash of power, Serena would trounce him. Having thought up to this point, Shifeng suddenly stood up. He then replaced the aura of wind with the aura of fire and cast Firestorm at Serena. The platform he currently stood on only had an area of 40 yards. Firestorm certainly covered most of it. At level 7, Firestorm's might could easily rival a Tier 2 large-scale destruction spell. A tsunami of flames descended from the sky. However, just as the flames were about to engulf Serena, her finger suddenly moved. In the blink of an eye, she had finished writing the runes required to cast Froststorm, a Tier 2 large-scale destruction spell. In the next moment, fire and ice clashed, filling the space around the platform with steam. Meanwhile, Shifeng's Firestorm did not even manage to touch the fallen angel. Fallen angels with high intelligence are really difficult to handle. Shifeng was not surprised. In the virtual reality games of the past, there would only be two possible outcomes when a player used a skill, either the skill hit or missed. There was no third possibility. In God's domain, however, one would encounter various scenarios when attacking using a skill. Aside from hitting or missing, it was also possible for the skill to be blocked, offset, or unraveled. Blocking a skill would result in one taking a small amount of damage, and normally, this was an action that most lords were capable of. However, offsetting or unraveling a skill was a feat that was doable only for high-tiered monsters and NPCs. Meanwhile, the method Serena had used to deal with Shifeng's Firestorm was to offset it using a skill of her own. When one successfully offset a skill, they would not receive any damage whatsoever. If even Firestorm is useless against her, my Tier 2 magic scrolls would most likely yield similar results. Shifeng felt a huge headache when he looked at Serena, who was currently hovering in midair. It would be great if Kite were here right now. Kite was a dark gold ranked personal guard. With his strength as a Tier 2 sword master, he could not overcome a Great Lord, which was equivalent to a Tier 3 class, but he could still pin it down for some time. His strength should not be below that of the Tier 1 fallen angel Serena. Invincible within the same tier? A sudden inspiration came to Shifeng as he looked at Serena's smiling face. Taboo skill. Taboo skills possessed the power to transcend tiers. Meanwhile, although Serena's strength was currently suppressed to Tier 1, her frightening basic attributes and arsenal of Tier 2 skills made her invincible even against ordinary Tier 2 classes. However, if a Tier 2 player managed to grasp a Tier 2 taboo skill, they would similarly become an invincible existence among other Tier 2 classes. Thank goodness I did not store Instant Strike inside my warehouse. As long as I manage to learn it, even if I cannot kill Serena, I still have a chance to defeat her. Shifeng's eyes glowed. Immediately, he retrieved the skill book of the Tier 2 taboo skill from his bag and began poring over it carefully. After half an hour passed, Shifeng felt that he was ready. If he wanted to learn the Tier 2 taboo skill Instant Strike, the first way to do so was to collect 100 thunder crystals, which was obviously impossible. The second option was to achieve a 100% skill completion rate. Previously, it had indeed been impossible for him to achieve a 100% completion rate for instant strike. However, after the Abyssal Blade was upgraded, his compatibility with the magic weapon had increased significantly. With the help of the 100-berry wine, which he had obtained from Blue Frost, he definitely had a chance to achieve a 100% skill completion rate right now. Hence, Shifeng drank a bottle of 100-berry wine and began rehearsing the Tier 2 taboo skill Instant Strike. Trying to learn a Tier 2 taboo skill? Serena revealed a faint smile. Not a bad idea. Unfortunately, the time you have left isn't enough for you to do so. Taboo skills required long periods of bitter training. There were no shortcuts available. Even a gifted person would require several days or over a dozen days to learn a Tier 2 taboo skill. Shifeng did not have much time left. It was simply impossible for him to succeed in learning the taboo skill in such a short period of time. Chapter 609 Instant Strike. Chapter 609 Instant Strike. While Shifeng was continuously rehearsing the Tier 2 taboo skill Instant Strike, a great upheaval rocked the evil ghost domain. The entire District 5 was destroyed overnight, and over half of the district's players had disappeared. To the players in the evil ghost domain, this was an inconceivable situation. Just what could actually wipe out the evil ghost domain's 5th ranking shelter? Not a single shelter in the evil ghost domain would be capable of going up against such a frightening power. Suddenly, a strong sense of crisis filled the air of the entire evil ghost domain. District 1's shelter. Leader Frost, what are we supposed to do now? Best Reincarnation, the leader of the second party, asked worriedly. Based on the information we discovered, it seems that the assault on District 5 comprised of a large number of powerful monsters, all level 40 and above. There were actually numerous lords participating in the monster assault as well. However, this is still not the scariest part. When our players went to investigate the situation at District 5, they encountered some survivors from the shelter. According to the survivors, the ones responsible for annihilating their District 5 were not actually those lords. Instead, it was the doing of a much more powerful monster. However, as they had been too far from the monster at the time, they did not get a clear look at what that monster was. They only know that that monster had annihilated hundreds of players with just a wave of its hand using black flames. It instantly killed even District 5's strongest player, Punishment Day. If we remain in this area, it is quite likely that we will encounter that monster as well. Although District 1 is a lot stronger than District 5, against that rank of monster, we simply stand no chance at all. Everyone present fell silent at Best Reincarnation's words. The enemy that obliterated District 5 was just too terrifying. It had not been easy for them to raise their shelter to the rank it had today. If it was destroyed, then their shelter's rank would also fall by 1, dropping from a medium shelter to a small shelter. If that happened, the advantage of the 100-berry wine they had possessed all this time would vanish as well. There was also no telling whether they would be able to obtain the 100-berry wine again the next time they upgraded their shelter to a medium shelter. Yet, if they moved their shelter to a low-level area, the distance they had to travel every day would be extremely long and time-consuming. They would most likely have to spend the entire day running just to commute between their leveling spots and the shelter. This would greatly impact the development of the shelter. Everyone, listen to me. This is an opportunity for our District 1. Blue Frost said after pondering for some time, an excited smile on his face. Opportunity? What opportunity? Everyone could not understand what was going through Blue Frost's mind. I believe that you guys have heard of this as well. After the incident with District 5, many shelters that previously refused to join a guild force began changing their minds one after another. They are all trying to gain the protection of shelters run by guild forces. In the worst-case scenario, they can also migrate directly to the large shelters of the guild forces and develop themselves there, Blue Frost said. Meanwhile, our District 1 has also joined Zero Wing. However, unlike the other shelters, the guild we joined is very strong. You guys must have seen the teleportation magic array design for yourselves. Brother Yifeng has also stated that, So long as we manage to gather the necessary materials, he will construct a teleportation magic array for our shelter. If we manage to annex the other shelters right now, our position in Zero Wing will also rise. I believe that nobody present wishes to remain as just the party leader of a shelter, right? All the party leaders expressed their agreement with Blue Frost's words. The things Zero Wing had revealed so far were already enough to show just how powerful the guild was, particularly the frightening combat power Shifeng had displayed as well as the funds that he had transferred to them. Zero Wing had even provided them with a training facility. As long as they made contributions to Zero Wing and raised their positions within the guild, they would be able to head to Jin Hai City's Big Dipper Training Center and undergo special training for their combat techniques. Every city had their own martial arts dojos and training centers. If one wanted to improve their combat techniques, it was definitely better to have someone guiding them. They had previously conducted some investigations in the real world regarding the Big Dipper Training Center. The moment they checked, however, they were shocked. The Big Dipper Training Center actually had a martial arts master overseeing it. Currently, the Big Dipper was already a famous training center, and many professional fighters from the surrounding cities had gone there to train. It was no longer a place that ordinary people could enter. Moreover, the amount one had to pay in order to become a member there was also not something ordinary people could afford. Although their knowledge regarding first-rate guilds was lacking, they knew full well just how precious a martial arts master was. A martial arts master was the ultimate force of humans. If they could receive pointers from a martial arts master, their combat techniques in God's domain would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Meanwhile, Zero Wing would allow them to undergo special training directly at the Big Dipper. The guild's financial prowess and influence had thoroughly shattered their perception of ordinary gaming guilds. Although they had earned quite a lot of money from playing God's domain, they were still far from being able to afford establishments like the Big Dipper Training Center. If they could climb their way up to Zero Wing's upper management, they would not have to worry about earning enough to support themselves in the future. I'm sure everyone clearly understands what a teleportation magic array represents. What we need to do now is annex the other shelters and obtain the materials required for the teleportation magic array as soon as possible. Even if we retreat from this area, we can simply rely on the teleportation array to return here in the future. After listening to Blue Frost's explanation, everyone nodded in agreement one after another. Previously, they had found it simply too difficult to gain control over the other shelters in the evil ghost domain. However, that changed after the incident with District 5. If they had a teleportation array, the amount of money and resources they could earn would be endless. Hence, the various party leaders began arranging workforces to collect the materials required for the teleportation magic array. At the same time, they also tried persuading the other shelters to subordinate themselves to District 1's shelter. That way, the members of these shelters would get to use the teleportation array of District 1. Inside the Darkness Shrine, Shifeng had already been rehearsing Instant Strike for 5 hours continuously now. After just 5 hours of practice, it was as if Shifeng was a veteran who had been practicing Instant Strike for many years. His movements when executing the taboo skill were practically the same as the holographic video provided by the skill book. I'm still off by a little. Sure enough, a Tier 2 taboo skill is not that easy to master. Although Shifeng had already given his all to trying to raise his completion rate, his best record was 95%. Right now, he could not increase it by even an additional %. Moreover, he had only managed to achieve this result because of the Abyssal Blade and the 100-berry wine. Otherwise, he would have taken several days to reach a 95% skill completion rate with Instant Strike. He did not have much time left to practice. Each bottle of 100-berry wine lasted only 1 hour and he had just 3 more bottles on hand. They would not last him till the very end. Human, you should give up. The might of a Tier 2 taboo skill is simply too immense. It is not that I am trying to look down on you. However, if you wish to grasp a Tier 2 taboo skill, you will need another 10 days of hard work at the very least. Serena could discern Shifeng's current progress in a single glance. Presently, you have already grasped the motions of the taboo skill completely. Unfortunately, Your comprehension of the skill is lacking. With the remaining 5 hours you have, you would be fortunate to raise your completion rate by even just another 1%. Lacking comprehension? Shifeng thought so as well. It was just like when he had achieved a 101% completion rate with Chop. That feeling had gone by in a flash, and he could not grab hold of it even if he wanted to. Comprehension? Compatibility? Does the comprehension Serena is speaking of refer to compatibility? Shifeng did not give it too much thought. He did not have much time left, not enough to wait out the 10-day cooldown to challenge the World Summit again. He then took out all the 100-berry wine in his bag and consumed all 3 bottles in rapid succession. Even with Shifeng's willpower and mental power, he still grew dizzy. The 100-berry wine was just like the black steel beer. The more one drank, the better the effect. Correspondingly, however, the side effects also grew stronger. It was best if players drank just 1 bottle at a time to maintain a clear mind, as players could steadily improve their completion rates and look for any shortcomings in their movements throughout the beverage's effective duration. Consuming too many bottles at once could result in players losing themselves to the alcohol. Now, Shifeng downed 3 bottles in one go. His compatibility rate instantly soared. This feeling is really great. At this moment, Shifeng felt as if he had become one with his sword. When he drew the abyssal blade and executed instant strike, each and every one of his movements felt light and natural. There was no excess power in any of his actions at all. Then, Shifeng's initially smooth movements suddenly changed. The afterimages of the abyssal blade, which were originally created due to Shifeng's overly fast speed, suddenly vanished. The abyssal blade in Shifeng's hand also became clear and visible. In the next moment, faint blue electric arcs manifested around Shifeng's body, filling the air with crackling sounds. The places these electric arcs touched also charred. System: instant strike skill completion rate 100%. Chapter 610 Higher Realm. Chapter 610 Higher Realm. Arcs of electricity continuously sparked around Shifeng. Although the electric arcs were tiny, the destructive power they contained was practically equivalent to a Tier 2 lightning spell. He actually succeeded. A shocked expression appeared on Serena's beautiful face. Learning a taboo skill was an enormous challenge. It was the same for both players and NPCs with high intelligence. In order to learn a taboo skill, one had to go through long periods of arduous training as well as achieve a certain degree of comprehension regarding the taboo skill. Serena wasn't the only one who was shocked by this result. Even Shifeng himself was quite shocked. It was extremely difficult for a Tier 1 class to learn a Tier 1 taboo skill, not to mention a Tier 2 taboo skill. Moreover, instant strikes requirements were exceedingly high even for a Tier 2 taboo skill. Achieving 100% completion rate on a taboo skill was a feat Shifeng had never managed, despite having been a Tier 3 Sword King in the past. In this life, however, he had actually done so while he was still a Tier 1 class. This was simply a dream. 99 more times to go. I need to hurry up. Although Shifeng was currently somewhat drunk, he was still able to maintain a relatively clear consciousness. To make sure he did not forget the feeling from before, he hurriedly continued with his rehearsal. Unfortunately, none of his next 3 tries managed to achieve a 100% completion rate at all. The highest he reached was 97%. He had only managed to achieve the 100% completion rate before due to luck. On this point, Shifeng was very certain. However, now that there was a first, achieving 100% again would become much easier. Following which, Shifeng continuously tried to recall the feeling he had felt before. His skill completion rate gradually increased as well, and soon after, he managed to maintain a stable 99%. He was only a thread away from 100%. Not only do I have to control my own body, but I also have to learn how to adapt to the external environment around me and constantly adjust to the environment. As Shifeng reviewed his memories, he did not only think about when he achieved a 100% completion rate with instant strike but also when he had achieved a 101% completion rate with Chop. Whether it was the refinement realm or the flowing water realm, both pursued internal control. Before, The Tier 5 Fallen Angel Serena had stated that he had already done very well in terms of movement and that he was only missing a little comprehension. If it was said that comprehension was compatibility, and that compatibility was adaptation, then what he needed to do was adapt to the environment. If he used the same methods to execute a skill in different environments, the results would naturally be different. This was just like how going from an ordinary environment to a high-gravity one would greatly affect a player's skill completion rate. However, what if this change to the environment was extremely subtle? It was highly possible that ignoring this minor change was the reason why players would never able to achieve a 100% skill completion rate, regardless of how perfect their movements were. Just as Shifeng continued drawing his sword and adapting to the surrounding airflow, the friction between his sword and the air suddenly generated a small spark. This small spark immediately attracted countless arcs of electricity to circle around Shifeng's body. System: Instant strike skill completion rate 100%. Sure enough, the progression in control goes from internal to external. Is this what the higher realm feels like? Shifeng finally discovered the direction he needed to take to advance. With a clear direction in mind, Shifeng no longer focused his concentration on his own body but instead shifted it towards his environment. As Shifeng grew increasingly familiar with his surroundings, the 100% skill completion rate of instant strike grew more frequent as well. Currently, Shifeng was achieving a 100% skill completion rate about once every 4 times he executed instant strike. Moreover, during the process of swinging his sword, Shifeng was also constantly making minor adjustments to better adapt his movements to the external environment. After training for another half an hour, Shifeng's improvement was undeniable. He was able to achieve a 100% skill completion rate practically every other time he executed instant strike. Before an hour had even passed since drinking the 3 bottles of 100-berry wine, he had already executed 100 instant strikes with a 100% completion rate. After Shifeng completed an instant strike that achieved a 100% completion rate for the 100th time, electricity purified his entire body, his skin becoming glossier and the muscles all over his body growing denser and more powerful. System: You have learned instant strike. Obtained basic lightning physique. Why does my body feel a lot lighter? Shifeng was greatly shocked when he saw the faint blue electric arcs coursing around his body. Carefully feeling out the changes to his own body, he exclaimed, "This lightning physique really is mysterious. The gravity my body is under should still be 3G. Yet, the effect the increased gravity has on my body has clearly decreased significantly even though none of my attributes have changed. Right now, the effect feels like the equivalent to a gravity of 1.5G. After the 3rd evolution of God's domain, the gravitational system had impacted the combat power of players significantly. Meanwhile, now that Shifeng's body had undergone such changes, it would become much easier for him to adapt to his environment. The current state he was in was similar to being under the effects of the 100-berry wine. Although the lightning physique's effects were very much inferior to the 100-berry wines, the fact that it was always active was a huge advantage. This instant strike is simply fantastic. It is actually able to improve a player's physique as well. No wonder it was so difficult to learn. In the past, Shifeng had heard of some taboo skills in God's domain that when successfully learned, would provide players with additional rewards. However, these taboo skills were usually high-tiered ones. He never expected that the Tier 2 instant strike was one such taboo skill. Physique was a kind of hidden attribute in God's domain. If a player's attributes reached a certain level, they would be able to trigger an extraordinary physique, allowing them to carry out feats that were definitely impossible in the real world. This kind of hidden attribute could not be viewed by players, so it was extremely difficult to alter or improve it. However, this kind of hidden attribute would have a significant impact on a player's combat power. After resting for a while and recovering his mental state, Shifeng walked up to Serena, smiling as he said, "Miss Serena, sorry for the long wait. Let us begin now." Currently, not only had he mastered the Tier 2 taboo skill instant strike, but he had also obtained the basic lightning physique. Not only did his body feel lighter right now, but its flexibility had also increased significantly. Shifeng even felt that his reflexes had sped up. However, His reaction speed was still a far cry from that of a gifted talent like Soaring Snake. Not bad. Despite being a mere mortal, you have actually managed to grasp a Tier 2 taboo skill while still being at Tier 1. Come, give me your best shot. Hopefully, you are able to entertain me for a little while, Serena said, licking her lips as she looked at Shifeng. The moment Serena was done speaking, the surrounding magma started roiling. The ground also began trembling as the fallen angel released a frightening aura. Is this the power of a Tier 1 fallen angel? Shifeng gulped down a mouthful of saliva. He knew that Serena had finally gotten serious. Just her aura alone was enough to render him breathless. Heavenly Dragon's power, activate. Blade liberation, activate. Shifeng was unwilling to lag behind. After activating Heavenly Dragon's power and blade liberation, his strength attribute was now equivalent to a High Lord of the same level. The instant Shifeng activated twofold Berserk, he tilted his body forward slightly. He then activated Phantom Kill and had his doppelganger get ready as well. Shifeng's sudden increase in strength surprised Serena somewhat. She had not thought the little human before her was capable of reaching such a level. She then stretched out her right hand. Instantly, a golden holy sword appeared in her hand. Countless wind blades wrapped around her weapon. She cast a Tier 2 skill, Stormblade, at Shifeng right away. Countless swords of light instantly surged towards Shifeng and his doppelganger. Meanwhile, Shifeng and his doppelganger also simultaneously activated the Tier 2 taboo skill Instant Strike. Shua. Both Shifeng and his doppelganger disappeared from where they stood to instantly appear beside Serena. Both swordsmen then began brandishing their swords at the fallen angel. Instant Strike, when activated, increased its user's attack speed by 500% for a short period of time. Originally, Shifeng's attack speed was already terrifying. Now, Shifeng and his doppelganger sent out dozens of sword lights in the time it took to take a single breath. Moreover, these sword lights had appeared practically simultaneously, with none ahead or behind the others. Such a fast attack. Serena's gaze sharpened as another golden holy sword appeared in her other hand. She then parried the barrage of attacks sent at her. Peng! 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 Serena's sword technique was flawless. Every movement of hers was utterly efficient as she blocked dozens of attacks continuously. However, even if Serena's defense were more perfect, there was still a limit to her attack speed. In the end, Shifeng managed to cut Serena's arm with the abyssal blade, causing -1 damage to the fallen angel. When Shifeng saw the compulsory -1 damage he dealt, his eyes nearly fell out of their sockets. Such a powerful Tier 2 taboo skill. You were actually able to break through my defense. Serena looked at the bloody cut on her arm. Gently moving her finger across the wound, she instantly returned her skin to its unblemished state. Then she looked at Shifeng, saying, "Although I don't want to admit it, since you were able to injure me, it is your win. You may take these items and leave." Chapter 611 Shrine Rewards. Chapter 611 Shrine Rewards. After Serena was done speaking, the fallen angel suddenly vanished. At the same time, the volcanic hell that surrounded Shifeng transformed into a golden shrine with an altar before him. 3 rainbow treasure chests were stacked up one upon another on the altar, and placed on top of these treasure chests was a thick and heavy black leather book. Victory at last. Shifeng breathed out a sigh of relief. Serena was just too powerful. Whether it was in terms of techniques or basic attributes, he was far inferior to the fallen angel. Shifeng and his doppelganger had sent out over 100 attacks within the 3 seconds of Instant Strike's duration. Yet, Shifeng had only managed to land a hit on Serena at the very last second. The fallen angel's strength was simply terrifying. Most likely, even Kite would not be a match for Serena, who had suppressed her strength to Tier 1. If Serena had suppressed her strength to Tier 2 instead of Tier 1, he would not have stood a chance against her at all. Although Shifeng had only managed to get through the test after immense difficulty, his harvest was similarly huge. During his 3 seconds of frantic attacking, Shifeng had thoroughly experienced Serena's perfect sword defense technique firsthand. He had seen for himself the sword technique of an NPC standing at the peak of God's domain. This was not something just any player would get to enjoy, as normally, they would have killed with a single hit. After Shifeng reviewed his memories of the previous battle a few times, he walked up to the altar and carefully picked up the black leather book. As soon as he did so, he felt a hard stare. Moreover, this feeling was not just limited to one person staring at him. Instead, he felt the gazes of a vast number of people. Every one of these gazes felt cold and violent. It was as if his body had submerged in a chilling, icy hell. Sure enough, the Bible of Darkness is not an ordinary item. Shifeng activated omniscient eyes and appraised the black leather book. Bible of Darkness, fragmented legendary item. The Bible of Darkness had been destroyed during the Great Destruction. However, the power of darkness contained within the Bible is extreme. If one can gather the other fragments, they can restore the Bible's power, gaining dominance over all demonic creatures and become the Lord of Demons. It's actually a fragmented legendary item? I heard that the Bible of Darkness Fantasy Extinguisher was an epic item. Was the one he obtained a replica? Shifeng muttered, feeling rather surprised as he looked at the quality of the Bible of Darkness in his hands. However, after giving it some thought, Shifeng felt it was possible. With how powerful Serena was, Fantasy Extinguisher should not have been able to injure the fallen angel at all with the strength he had at that time. It was highly possible that he had chosen the first option instead. Meanwhile, Fantasy Extinguisher had managed to become a peerless expert in the Black Dragon Empire thanks to the Bible of Darkness. With the help of the Bible of Darkness, Fantasy Extinguisher managed not only to become exceedingly powerful himself but also to increase the strength of his guild significantly. Only afterward did Blue Frost and the others from District 1 shine brightly. Back then, countless guilds had looked at Fantasy Extinguisher enviously. There was nothing remarkable about owning a single epic item. However, the Bible of Darkness was no ordinary epic item, as it held the power to increase the overall strength of a guild. The Bible of Darkness was capable of strengthening players with the power of darkness. Not only could players receive a huge boost in attributes, but they could also obtain an enhanced skill corresponding to their classes. This was the reason why the Fantasy Shrine had managed to form the invincible Black Demon Legion in the past, allowing the guild to become one of the tyrants of the Black Dragon Empire. Back then, even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Blood Legion had not been a match for the Black Demon Legion. If Fantasy Extinguisher had gained such achievements by relying on a replica, what would have happened if he had obtained the real Bible of Darkness? Most likely, the entire Black Dragon Empire would have fallen into the Fantasy Shrine's hands. Shifeng inwardly grew excited as he looked at the Bible of Darkness in his hands. He had finally completed one of the steps required to become an overlord in God's domain. Whether it was the magic weapon Abyssal Blade or the fragmented legendary ranked Heavenly Dragon's Breath, both were items that focused on increasing his personal strength. They were of little use in raising the overall strength of his guild. However, the Bible of Darkness was different. It was an item focused on increasing the overall strength of many players. With the Bible of Darkness in hand, he would be able to form a group of Black Demon Guards. With his special training plan, he would be able to quickly establish a Black Demon Legion that surpassed even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Blood Legion. At that time, who in Starmoon Kingdom would be able to compete with him? After some fantasizing, Shifeng then stored the Bible of Darkness and shifted his gaze towards the 3 rainbow treasure chests. I have really made a killing from the epic quest this time. Not only did I get a fragmented legendary item, but I also obtained a chapter of shelter and a magic device forging design. Shifeng laughed. He quickly tucked the contents of all 3 rainbow treasure chests into his bag. The first rainbow treasure chest contained 188 soul crystals. Though Shifeng himself had no use for these things, he would be able to upgrade the Lion's Bar to a 2-star bar with this many soul crystals. At that time, the production volume of the 100-berry wine would increase to a level barely enough to supply the upper echelons of both District 1 and 0 Wing. The second rainbow treasure chest contained the chapter of shelter. Before coming to the World Summit, Shifeng had asked Blue Frost about large shelters in detail. If a small shelter was akin to a small village, Then a medium shelter was a small town, while a large shelter was a large town. Why were so many guild forces madly accumulating resources and were adamant in upgrading a shelter to a large shelter? It was because larger shelters possessed a certain degree of self-defense. The number of players a shelter could hold was not unlimited. If players wished to become a resident of a shelter, they had to register themselves with said shelter. Meanwhile, the number of players a shelter could register was limited. If there was no cap to registration, players within the Dark Den would have long since migrated to the best shelters available to develop themselves. It was also precisely this limitation that severely restricted the development speed of a shelter. A small shelter could register a maximum of 10,000 players, which was roughly equivalent to the member count of a small guild. Medium shelters could register up to 30,000 players, which was roughly equivalent to the player population of a small town. Aside from having a larger population, players could also construct some specialty buildings such as the Lion's Bar in a medium shelter. The overall strength of a medium shelter was significantly higher than a small shelter's. Meanwhile, when a medium shelter was upgraded to a large shelter, the number of players the shelter could register would undergo a qualitative change, directly increasing to 100,000. That number could practically rival the member count of a second-rate guild. Moreover, the functions of the shelter would also increase notably. The increase was not limited to just the skill books and specialties supplied. Players of the shelter would also be able to tame mounts. Mounts could be said to be the lifeblood of players residing within the Dark Den. With no teleportation magic arrays in the Dark Den, players could only rely on their own 2 feet to travel to their desired destinations. With a mount, the mobility of players would improve significantly, and as a result, their strength would also rise much faster than before. Hence, the various guild forces were desperately accumulating resources in order to create a large shelter of their own. This was also why plenty of independent shelters subordinated themselves to guild forces. As long as they joined a guild force, they could head to the large shelter controlled by said guild force and purchase mounts. Otherwise, they would have to wait until their own shelters were promoted into large shelters or try their luck in large-scale team dungeons. Now that Shifeng had the chapter of shelter, he could directly promote the shelter of District 1 to a large shelter. The players inside the shelter could then begin to accumulate funds and resources. As soon as they reached a sufficient level, they would be able to purchase a mount of their own. Compared to the players of other shelters, the players of District 1 would be able to save up on plenty of time. Although I've obtained the chapter of shelter, I still don't have a way to return to the shelter right now. It seems that I can only wait until the cooldown of the position teleportation scroll ends before making another trip to District 1's shelter. Shifeng suddenly recalled that he had arrived at the central area of the Dark Den through a teleportation gate. As for the method of returning to the evil ghost domain, he had no idea whatsoever. With the items he came for in hand, Shifeng did not continue idling around inside the Lord of Destruction's shrine. He took out a return scroll and began chanting the incantation required to teleport back to White River City. After 20 seconds passed, Shifeng transformed into a streak of light and disappeared from the shrine. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,